Stand, please. Thank you. United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, welcome everyone. Do I have a motion for the consent agenda?
Second.
All those in favor? Okay. Mrs. Polish? Oh, Mr. Eric, do you have some announcements?
Yes, appointments, committee just approved.
Can you hear us?
No, this
No.
is not.
Well, talk loudly.
The school committee just approved, as part of the consent agenda, the assistant principalship to Tiverton Middle School to Mr. David Frerish. David's been our interim since September and has done a very good job as interim, and I recommended him for permanent appointment, so congratulations to David.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to move up 6A, B, and C.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Okay. 6A. Mr. Eric?
It's part of our monthly Spotlight on Success program. Actually, Mrs. Black, you brought this to our attention. The CASIC staff did a dance number, and I believe it's Coming to America from Neil Diamond. Is that correct? Did I get the
Yes.
song correct?
Yes.
So, is someone going to play this?
Are they going to dance?
No, they're not. The staff did not want to dance for us.
We
live.
invited them to, right?
We did invite them, but they chose to submit this video in place of a live performance.
It was at the Memorial Day celebration. You can see all the children and the parents were there, and it was a huge hit. It was so exciting. I wanted them to come do it for you, but they didn't want to.
Well,
Okay.
we did it for the children, so the
That
reaction of the
good-
children, you miss out.
That's right.
Yeah,
It
it's
was
true.
wonderful. It was.
It was a great success. We decided that we wanted to do a flash mob for the kids. We thought it would be important keeping it a secret, so at the end of the Memorial Day celebration, we just played the intro to the music, and they had no idea what was going
No.
on. Everyone was looking around, and all of a sudden, the staff came in and started doing it. So we're going to show you a small clip, and then we're planning on putting it on the website.
Oh,
So
good.
that everyone can see.
That'll be
It
nice.
was really great because the teachers took their time before and after school to be involved in it. The kids loved it in the end. They stood up and all danced with us, and it was a great success. So we hope you enjoy it.
America's Got Talent, watch out.
And that right
That's a
there is
video.
the president of the union, NEA, Amy Mullen.
And you even had time moved.
Oh, they did such a good job.
Very, very
It was wonderful. Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Julie.
Thank you. Second one?
Ms. Santa would like to present some certificates for those math teachers who helped with the rewriting of our K-12 math curriculum and aligning it to the Common Core standards.
I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank teachers and administrators who served on the math curriculum writing team and also the leadership teams. I want to thank them for their commitment of time and energy over the course of the year. Teachers devoted over 100 hours to this process, and in addition, additional time was spent preparing to be away from their classrooms and getting materials ready for substitutes, so we really appreciate that. Principals also did an amazing job in ensuring that substitute coverage was available and supporting teachers throughout the process. Our staff worked alongside teachers from Newport and Bristol Warren. They engaged in an in-depth study of the standards and read through an abundance of guidance documents. It was a lot of paperwork. They spent numerous days reviewing research on effective mathematics instruction that informed the content and the sequence of the units of study that they developed. They also solicited feedback from their colleagues along the way back in their buildings. The teachers were extremely dedicated to the process, as were the administrators, and the process was often intense at times. But all in all, I think everyone would agree that it proved to be a very in-depth professional learning experience. And I'm hoping that all of the participants are very proud of the outcome of our completed K-12 curriculum, and in knowing that as a result of their work, all of our math teachers, K-12, now have a curriculum that's fully aligned to the Common Core standards and designed to support the success of our students. As we begin the implementation next year, I'm hopeful that teachers will continue to support the process and share their expertise with us. We certainly have a lot of work ahead of us. So I'm going to call up names, and I'm thankful for those teachers who were able to be here, and I'll move over this way. And for the support of Mr. Fiore and Mr. Rarick as well.
And I'd like to say thank you. We have all the new buildings, and they are beautiful. We thank the community for that, but it's the people with the pulse. It's you people that make everything happen. Thank you so much. Okay, Mr. Rarick?
I'm not quite sure. Mrs. Polish?
Yep. As some of you may or may not know, we had 2 post-proms this year. We had a senior post-prom and we had a junior post-prom. Certainly, there's a lot of people that support those post-proms, from the parents to the advisors, Mr. Fizzette and Mr. McKinnon, but the people who often don't get recognition, I wanted to recognize tonight. The junior parents who helped me run post-prom for the juniors asked that I bring this on, and I know I echo the senior advisors as well. There's an awful lot of work they do behind the scenes, from moving tables in, moving tables out, showing us how to turn lights on, showing us how to turn them off. They've carts for us so that we made sure we could bring things in, bring things out, made sure we were stocked, made sure we had garbage cans, made sure doors were open, made sure doors were closed. I mean, there was an awful lot of work that goes on behind the scenes by the custodial staff, and I just wanted to make sure that we spotlighted them for all of their help. They were both very, very successful. Our junior prom was much like tonight, only worse. So there were 138 parents and guardians who were very happy that their children had a safe place to be all night. And is Paul here? He's here. And I just wanted to recognize the custodians, and I know Paul was here to represent them, and thank you very much. We just couldn't have done it without all the hard work, Paul.
Thank you. And what's the next one now?
Tiverton Middle School Legislative Grant Award. I believe Representative Edwards was scheduled to come, but has some hearings that he needs to attend, and he sent his lovely wife here, Donna, to present the legislative grant for Tiverton Middle School Athletics in the amount of $2,500.
And Representative Edwards is right now testifying about the tolls, so everyone send some good messages up to the State House, please.
So we'd like to thank Mrs. Black. Rep. Edwards also wants to thank Kelly Levesque for her diligence and persistence in following up on this very important grant. The Tiverton Middle School was the first group he received a grant for, and he is pleased to be able to help again this year. Jay apologizes for not being here in person, but he's testifying up at the State House on his bill to stop the tolls. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Donna, for coming. Thank you. Give it to Kelly. Kelly's running. The Ranger School graduation.
Yes,
Gift.
Mr. Cabral,
And Mr. Larkin, Dr. Larkin, you want to accuse yourself?
Ms. Farley would like to speak to the committee about the fourth grade gift that the Ranger School outgoing class, graduating class, would like to leave the school.
I did leave a packet right in front of you.
Yep.
Before you-
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, my iPad isn't hooking up tonight, so you'll have to use that. So each year, the fourth grade gives a present to the school. Last year, I believe it was encyclopedias. The year before, it was a bench that
Nice
was out
bench,
front.
yeah.
This year, we were kind of trying to think, all right, what could be a little different? What could we do? And we thought we would like to try to bring back to life the pediment that was above the door of the old Ranger School. I don't know if you remember the three tiger cubs. It's been sitting in the back boiler room of Ranger School. It's in absolutely pristine condition. We looked, Mr. Cabral and Billy White and I kind of walked around the school trying to find a spot inside the school to be able to put it up. But it's big, it's really heavy, and it didn't seem like we had a wall inside to be able to support it. So after kind of more looking around the grounds, we were hoping that we'd be able to mount it sort of as a sign right outside the right-hand side of the entrance to Ranger. We kind of drew up some blueprints, had an architect here in town just kind of look at it and say, do you think this would support it? We were hoping to have it done by the end of the school year, but it's not to happen. So we're hoping for before the start of the school year in August. We have money put aside in our budget for the fourth grade farewell gift. And then on top of that, we also have money in a school improvement fund, so we would also probably drain out of that. We really want to make sure that we do it the right way. It's a beautiful piece.
It is, that's
So,
nice.
and we also wanted to include in it some additional landscaping around the front of the school. It's sort of a little bare.
Yeah, that looked nice, yeah.
So,
That's wonderful, thank you.
our idea, and if it's okay, we'd love to go ahead with that.
Okay.
Mr. Eric?
Certainly.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion to approve the plan to mount the old Ranger pediment, display it at the new Ranger School outside.
All those in favor?
Thank you very
And
much,
again,
Sarah.
We made it a point before we left and turned the school over to our maintenance staff to move that, there's a nice picture that Manny provided to us. That's what's going to be installed, the 3 cubs. So we took it all, they took it right off the front, and we've been able to, keep it. And I think this is a wonderful idea to keep the tradition of old Rangers still alive and to be used very appropriately and very stylishly in front of the school.
That's a wonderful
I think
idea.
these ties with the past are very important to any community, and it does help alumni of the school still feel a connection.
Oh, it's
Absolutely.
true. When they come in.
Yes,
It's true.
and that they're still a part of the school.
And people have been asking where these things are, so it's good that they come back out.
And that was certainly part of the rationale, I know, with Fort Barton, keeping the
front.
front that doesn't do anything, but just keeping it there.
Just reminds
So,
us.
yeah, so great, this is
When
very,
the
very
architect
nice.
said we're going to knock it down and face it the other way, Fort Barton said, oh, no, you can't touch that front.
Thank
So
you
it came
very
out
much to
beautiful.
this fourth grade farewell committee, that's
It's
a
wonderful.
lovely idea.
Thank you. Okay, now, all in favor? I thought so. I thought we
Yeah, we
did.
voted again.
Okay, now, Dr. Larkin,
Yes.
thank you. Now we'll go to the kneecap, Mr. Barrett.
Yes, we've had, just for those folks at home and those on the newspapers, we've had, the committee has had a number of meetings where the topic of high school graduation requirements, how they've changed, and what we're doing as a district to respond to those changes. But there was still a lot of agreement on the part of the committee that we would like to have someone from RIDE come down just to clarify some questions that we've had that keep coming up during our discussions. I provided the committee with 6 questions that seem to be common or have been common in our conversations. When we asked Mary Ann Snyder from RIDE to come down, we provided Mary Ann with the questions ahead of time, and of course, whatever questions folks may have or the committee may have. But I felt those 6 would be a great starting point since they kept coming up in our conversations. If we really, we had our answers, but we wanted to hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak, so.
So do you want to start with these 6? What were you thinking as far as process?
I would think maybe if we did the 6 questions and then
Move on
All right,
to,
moved
so
on to any others.
we'll have Mary Ann sit at the
Yes,
white
I think
table.
that would be, she gets the,
And then, parents, if you could,
actually, if Mary Ann wanted to sit
Oh,
next to
okay.
Elaine,
and then if you have
Yeah.
questions, you can come up there. So you want to read the
Yeah, I'll
question?
read the questions to the folks at home. The first question is, or was, if a student takes and passes the AccuPlace or prior to the kneecap in October 2013, does that student still need to take the kneecap? And if the answer is yes, why does the student need to take the kneecap if they pass the AccuPlace?
Got it. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here. And thank you for sending the questions in advance. That was really helpful. So just to be clear, that the overall intent of the graduation requirements is to make sure that our students in Rhode Island are prepared for college and careers. And the best way to us have some certainty that that is in fact the case is for them to do well on the kneecap test. The kneecap test is the assessment that's aligned to our standards, and those standards were developed in conversation with higher education many years ago. And we actually looked at textbooks that were used at CCRI and said, what kinds of math and how well should they know it in order to be able to enroll at CCRI and not have to take remedial coursework. So that was part of the foundation for building kneecap. So the graduation requirements right now are that students have to be partially proficient. And so this first cohort of students, the 4,100 kids statewide who didn't pass, are at all different levels, quite frankly. And I don't think it's possible for all of them to get to partial proficiency. although the amount of work that's going on right now in our state is truly remarkable and supportive of those kids. But the process is for them to retake the kneecap, to understand whether they are reaching that partial proficient line or whether they've made significant progress toward that partial proficiency. That said, there are other tests like Accuplacer, AP exams, the PSAT, SAT, the baccalaureate program. There are all kinds of other measures that kids can use, and they can take them now if they choose to, and they can bank their scores if they want. However, they still have to take that retest in their senior year of kneecap, because that is the way that we can be sure as a state that kids are well prepared. So I know that right now that there are some people who are concerned that kids would have to retake the kneecap even if they had another passing score on the Accuplacer or another assessment. The process is for now to get everyone through the kneecap as much as possible.
So you've determined cut scores for these other AP, SAT, Accuplacer, but those cut scores magically don't come into play until March. I guess I, as well as I'm sure other parents, are confused. Why, if you've already decided that our goal is to show proficiency or some level of proficiency, you've determined that there is a cut score that will in fact meet that, and our kids meet it, either by taking the Accuplacer or they have an SAT math score or English score, then why the necessity to take a second kneecap? Why not just say, we have determined there are other proficient measures, you've met them, and we'll focus on those children who haven't met any of those.
I mean, I truly understand the concern.
Well, it's not only a concern, it's the logic of it.
The logic, I know.
understand the logic.
And how it serves the student who has already demonstrated proficiency on an acceptable exam. How does it benefit the student to be placed then in senior year in extra math classes and be prepping for a kneecap when in fact that student has demonstrated proficiency? In my mind, that's like making a student retake a class when they've already passed the final.
I hear you. So I would say a couple of things. One is they don't necessarily need to be in a remedial math course. If the school feels that they have a level of math that is sufficient for them to be successful in their plans, they can take a different math course. It doesn't necessarily have to be remedial, even though they have to take the kneecap. So I want to be really clear about that. I wouldn't want to put them in a senior remedial class just for a test that they're taking in October. And when I spoke with Andrea Castaneda, who is the person who is overseeing the process, I shared the questions with her and said, help me understand the thinking behind this. She said that the idea is that they still want kids to register on the kneecap, even though they have another test. Those tests, like the Accuplacer, are not aligned to our standards. So while we've come up with comparable cut scores, it doesn't mean that they necessarily have the math that they need in order to be successful in college and careers. So the system is such that we want to move kids through the kneecap and eventually through the PARCC exam.
But in fact, the Accuplacer is what CCRI has determined is a best measure of whether students will be successful in math classes.
And
So-
the SAT in many other colleges.
So that seems to be a conflict there, to say that the Accuplacer does not indicate students are ready for math if CCRI has determined it does.
All I can tell you is what Andrea, I will take your concerns back to her and explain your frustration with this, and I can get back in writing to you. It's really, I think, I'm not sure.
I mean, I agree. I think all of us want our children to be ready for college and career, but you're basically having them take an exam that colleges don't look at. No college.
Or, recognize
They
as
don't
an
recognize
acceptable
the
measure
NCAP.
of math
Yep.
proficiency,
So-
whereas they do exactly recognize the Accuplacer and the SAT.
ACTs, right, so it's a little bit of a confusing why we say they're acceptable, but they're magically not acceptable until after they've taken the second kneecap. I know one of my concerns is it's going to be about $1 million to administer that second kneecap, and I would love to see that $1 million come back to the districts.
Well, I can explain that. That I know a lot about. So it's actually not $1 million to retake the test one time. That $1 million is for the next 3 years. So it's the transition piece from our current graduation requirements using kneecap to Park. So what the $1 million does is it purchases for next year. We were able to build a retest form, and that retest form is a shorter version of the kneecap, and that will be the test that's offered in late February, early March of 2014. So some part of that $1 million built that test. Another part of that $1 million is for the seniors who are retaking the test with their 11th grade peers next fall, in the fall of 2014, and in the fall of 2015, I believe.
But it is for the retest.
The retest, all of it, but I'm saying it's not just one retest, it's
Well,
for
but it
3
is-
years of, it's 3 years of transition
It's 3 years
work.
of retest.
Not necessarily. After next year, kneecap is going away for
Right.
grades 3 to 8.
Right.
But for kids who are currently freshmen, they'll be sophomores next
Okay.
year. In their junior year, it will be the first year of Park. They have not been fully taught on the Common Core. The entering class of 9th graders this fall will be the first graduating class that will be all Common Core aligned, and they will transition to the Park. So kids who are currently freshmen and sophomores will have to take the kneecap, even though the kneecap has gone away for our other states, like in Vermont, in New Hampshire, and Maine. But Rhode Island kids will take the kneecap in the fall of 14 and 15. Those aren't retakes, that's just their test for graduation
Okay,
purposes.
so I think our bigger concern is just, it doesn't make sense that there are other exams that don't qualify until
I
after
hear
they've
you.
taken the second.
I hear you.
So on this question, I've been talking to a lot of people at Durfee High School, at BCC, at CCRI. I like to talk to people that are in the trenches trying to make this work. And my first thing is that there's a lot of questions about the test itself. You know that. So I talked to Tom Segoras about that. I had a long conversation with him. So my question is, if someone passes the Accuplacer or the SATs, or I think it's not right to say an AP thing, because but anyway, if they pass that, and then they don't pass this kneecap again, because I don't consider it a valid test, what happens then?
They can still graduate. If they have a passing score on the Accuplacer or some other test, they can graduate. They will absolutely
They're going to be
graduate.
able to move forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Can I just clarify something? We were talking about remedial courses.
Yes.
We have about 40-some students who are in the low partial proficiency cohort. About half of them will be offered a 3 times a week proficiency review course leading up to the kneecap. The other students, all the students will be involved in the virtual math program.
Yep.
And then the other students who are within 5 scale points, they will be offered 8 tutoring sessions as an option for them to get ramped up a little bit prior to the test. I'm pleased to hear that students can bank scores. We have some students already with SAT scores in the bank. My concern is that if those senior scores are used in any way, that a senior in high school who already has a bank score may not necessarily give their best effort. I may be speculating, but I could be accurate.
You think all of your years of dealing with teenagers is going to, yeah.
Just-
I agree. He tells you that? I agree.
So the
I
more
mean,
students who have
yeah,
bank scores,
I agree.
Correct.
I don't think their scores are going to be valid to use in any way.
So what are you going to use those for?
Then there will be no public reporting of those. They will not go in any student transcript. They are simply a way for us to make sure that every student has been offered an opportunity. I think part of the record keeping, there are 4,100 students. So some students may say that they have a banked score, they may or may not. I think the opportunity to take the kneecap in their senior year will just be assurance, if you will, that everyone has had another opportunity. You then, at the school level, can go back and say, okay, I'll use my own son's name, John Snyder, he retook the kneecap, he he didn't reach partial proficiency, but I do have a transcript that said he took an Accuplacer exam in the summer of 2013, and it reached the cut score that we needed, so he's okay. And then you will make those decisions for graduation purposes.
So will you do so?
Now,
Yeah.
we do know the students already.
Yep.
So I'm just saying, it's being done now, the students already know.
And what we
That they're
heard
back.
was they can bank those scores.
Correct.
So will you use those as part of the teacher evaluation?
No, absolutely not.
So, but is this, you just said they would have the opportunity to take it in fall of their senior year?
They will have to take it in there, yes.
It's actually a requirement.
Required.
And what if a student and the student's parents say, we don't want our child to have to sit through another kneecap, my child has a banked score? I assume that the student will just
We get a
qualify
zero.
for graduation.
Yeah, but we get a 0.
But she said those scores are not
But those scores are
reported.
not.
They don't take the test.
In their senior year,
seniors.
just to be really clear, let me step back. You don't get a 0 because when students retake the test as seniors, that is not factored into school accountability.
Oh.
It's the junior class that counts for accountability. The retake of seniors will not factor into teacher evaluation. It doesn't factor into school accountability.
Is that new? Because that's the first time I've actually heard.
No, and I'm in charge of school accountability, so I can say,
And that I have to say is
Just-
one of my
Can I
frustrations.
just get,
Yep, go
can I
ahead.
just ask Marion to
Yes.
clarify?
Yeah, yeah.
Clear it So I'm clear.
Absolutely, Bill.
If the child banks the score, which, because BCC, we have a very good relationship with them.
Me too.
And they offered to come in and give the exam and help us with it.
Yep.
So we're glad to hear that the kids can bank the scores.
yep,
Get it confirmed. We heard it, but now we heard it from
Yep.
them, so we feel better about that.
And it's on tape.
And it's
and it's on tape.
my iPad, so it's real.
It's really, I'm the horse tonight, I understand, so this is the horse's mouth. I'd rather be the mouth than other
part that I'm
parts.
asking is, the child banks it,
Yep,
or has the passing score, that's one of my other questions that we have, on the SAT, they meet
Right.
the
Right.
requirement.
right,
Come October, we say, okay, up to those 45 seniors that we have, okay, here's the test, here's where you're taking it. And if the child is opted out by the parent, it doesn't count against the school?
no,
Nothing?
no, it does not. It does not, the retakes in the senior year are not used for school accountability. It doesn't count toward your absolute numbers of kids who reach proficiency, and it does not factor in, are you in fact testing 95% of the students?
So if they banked it and they don't take it, they can graduate as long as...
And
they're-
so this whole, and I'm taking notes to remind myself, the whole thing that seemed to be outgrowths of question 1B, I'm going to bring back to Andrea and the commissioner and get their response and share it with you in writing. So, okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
The second question, Mary Ann, is... I'm
Mr.
sorry,
Mayor,
I'm sorry, I'm
Dr.
sorry.
Larkin, go
I
ahead.
apologize.
I had a few questions, some to enlighten myself and some to, I think, enlighten the public. So if the kneecap is aligned to the curriculum, and assuming everything worked perfectly, what would be the expected percentage of 11th graders who would get a 1 on the math kneecap? 'Cause that seems to be where we're all kind of falling down.
There is no expectation. So if you use the word, if we were, I think, in an ideal
Yeah.
place. So from my perspective, and my background is in testing, no child would get a 1. That would be my expectation, because we have a criterion referenced test. The test, despite some things that I've read in the press, said that it's designed to make some kids be in level 1. That is absolutely,
Right, it's not on a curve.
it's not on a curve. So I can't tell you, I don't know what the percentage of students would be in a level 1. There are probably some students that, despite best efforts, wouldn't score at least at a partially proficient range due to, complicated issues. And I don't know what percentage that might be, quite frankly. I wouldn't look at the percentage of kids with IEP and say, oh, that's the number. I don't think that's accurate at all as a former special ed teacher. So I don't know.
Okay. So then, if we don't know, but assuming that we, again, had a perfect, resources, perfect curriculum, and perfect teaching and perfect learning, that would be some small percentage.
Yes,
Then 40%
absolutely.
is not a,
That is not what we would want.
not what we want, not what we expect.
Absolutely not.
Not by chance.
No.
And 40% is consistent across 3 states that actually have 11th grade data, is my
Roughly.
understanding of
Yeah.
sort of their
I
reporting.
think Vermont's like in the mid to low 30s.
Yeah, they're all hovering, you
Yep.
know, probably within the range of
Yep.
the standard
Yep.
of that test. So, or standard of error of the test. So what is the curricular smoking gun? What is the explanation for this result?
So, and I've looked at this, I think we started examining this since the first year that the kneecap results came in. I remember at the time I was the testing director in Rhode Island, and we met with Governor Kachuri at the time, and we actually had a math summit back in 2007-8. And we invited in Uri Treisman, who's the director of the Dana Center at UT Austin. He was considered the math curriculum expert at the time, and he looked at our data on NAEP and on our own kneecap and met with us. I don't know if any of you attended back then. Some of you did, okay. And so we did, in fact, see consistent patterns. And there are some things we know. We know for sure that when you look at reading progression among students, it's easier to scaffold and have kids kind of build their knowledge base over time. So even if they're behind in some grade level, some things can catch on, they can kind of grow, and there are lots of supports you can offer to have kids access reading material. The same is not as true in math. If you miss big gaps of math instruction, if something didn't click with you when you were doing fractions in 4th or 5th grade, and you missed that, you are always going to struggle with algebra, because there's a certain amount of flexible thinking. You need to be really secure in your fraction space to do well in algebra. So what we're seeing is almost an accumulation of some amount of gaps in kids' knowledge by the time they get high school, and it's impossible for the teachers to kind of close all those gaps in a short amount of time. So we know what Uri advised us to do is we had to make sure our curriculum was aligned. We know that we had kids, because they all take a survey at the end of kneecap, we have kids telling us that they never took Algebra 1 or geometry by the time they were juniors in high school, yet they were being given tests that depended upon them having Algebra 1 and geometry under their belts. We know that kids had gaps that were never closed, so they entered high school not feeling really secure on their knowledge base. We know that we had curriculum that wasn't aligned. When I heard the work that you guys are all doing to align your math curriculum right now to the Common Core, and I was talking with a group of teachers, it's hard work. It's hard work to do that alignment, to understand the standards, that work hadn't been done in Rhode Island. It's just really starting now with the Race to the Top money that we got. All of that is supporting this curriculum building. Teachers need a lot more professional development. And I was an elementary ed teacher trained, and my passion is literacy. I am not as comfortable, well, after graduate school I am, but I was not as comfortable teaching math. I did not feel secure, so that if kids didn't understand it, that I had 3 or 4 more tools in my tool belt to help kids. You didn't understand it that way? Let me re-explain it. So it's almost like a perfect storm of things we needed to address systemically in our state, and not just our state, Vermont, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, across the country. When I talk to my colleagues, it's just a phenomenon. So we're struggling with it, and the final thing is the kneecap test is hard. It is really a hard test. I know, I took the test too, and I had to muscle my way through it. And I think it's closer to what the park is going to require of our kids. It's closer to what colleges and universities and business people are telling us they want of our high school graduates. So I won't sit here and make excuses to you. It's a hard test. We didn't have aligned curriculum. We have a lot of work to do to make sure that we're closing those gaps.
So I think the question that a lot of parents would have then is, we recognize there's a problem.
Yep.
And the result that we have in the testing certainly validates that. And we are working on it. And to a certain extent, we're still speculating as to what the real cause is. I know that that RIDE, and the Board of Regents and now the Board of Education, Higher Board of Education, has sort of said, this is the year. But I think a lot of people will ask, well, if we haven't gotten it right yet, because it's clear that we haven't gotten it right as a
Right.
state, as a
country.
as districts, and as a country, why are we persisting in this?
So I will tell you what I believe strongly, and that is because we have been graduating 4,100 kids a year who have not basic math under their belts. And whether we give them a piece of paper or not, we are sending them out into the world without any math. Right now, yes, we have this requirement, but there are so many safety nets in place that you can retake the kneecap a couple of times, you can take Acuplacer, you can do all kinds of things, and if all that fails, you can ask for a waiver to your superintendent. So there are I dare say there will not be a kid who is denied a diploma if they have a decent amount of math under their belts. But what we have done is we have rung the alarm bell, and I've been with the state for a long time, more than I care to remember. I've been trying to ring that alarm bell for many, many years, most loudly in 2007 when we had that math summit, and no one paid attention. Well, now with these requirements are in place and people are paying attention. We have kids aligned to math modules. We have ramp-up programs. CCRI is offering a program. We're doing something about it. So those 4,100 kids may not have all the math that they need, but they're going to have a lot more had we not put these requirements into place.
Okay, thank you. That's probably the most lucid explanation I've actually heard about why we're kind of persisting in this. Last question, and then I'll yield the floor. So one of the statements was that the kneecap is our best judge for whether kids are ready to graduate. So do we have any body of evidence that really that supports that? What is the evidence that really tells us that that's the case?
So again, I'm too old to what I would tell you is I would love to say that we had lots of validity studies under our belt. We don't have the money to do the kind of validity studies that we would like. So what we do is we've built a strong foundation. As I mentioned earlier, when we built the test, we talked to professors at CCRI to say, what do you want kids to know and be able to do? When we set the standards, we had college professors and high school teachers looking at every test question. They drew the cut scores. RIDE did not, the Department of Ed in Vermont or New Hampshire did not, teachers did. And when we set those standards, we came back with impact data, it's called. And we said, if you cut this score, here's how many kids would actually pass the test. And they were in shock. And after you give them that impact data, when you do standard setting, you say, you have the time now, go back and redraw that cut score. And they drew it at the same place. So then we were perplexed and we said, do you realize what you're doing by setting the cut score at this level? And the professors and the high school teachers said, kids need to be able to do this. And that's that is quite frankly the strongest foundation we have right now for knowing that's what kids need.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I guess I'm hearing that's what kids need, but we didn't give it to them, and now they're paying the price.
So I will just
That's
get,
what
I hear you too. I agree with you, but I will say that this.
And we're basically saying they can't make up gaps, and I know that my son had a gap that he still hasn't made up. But we're saying we're going to cram for this diploma. We're going to cram this stuff into your head. They're probably going to forget it the day after they take the exam. And we're going to say, that's basic math. You've learned basic math, but I'm not sure they actually will have. That's my concern.
And I completely agree with you. Yeah. I think what's going to happen is what should be happening now is these graduation requirements aren't going away. So we are trying to do a lot, and then we have a year's left of instruction for these kids. They got the information in February of their junior year. They won't graduate for a year and 4 months later. So hopefully we're not cramming. Hopefully what we are doing is dedicating more time and resources to get them prepared. And hopefully what we're doing is identifying kids much earlier. We're no longer going to wait till the junior year kneecap, because if we look at the 4,100 kids who scored at level 1, when we matched those kids, for those kids who have been in Rhode Island since they were in the 3rd grade, they were at half of those kids were at level 1 in 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade.
And I would say, as a district, we knew that, and we've been working with them all along, and it made no I mean, we put things into place, we put programs into place. We've been working with them since 3rd grade, since 5th grade, since 8th grade, because we've gotten these. And we've seen the results. We've seen B students. We've seen the proficiency that they can show in the class, but not on this one standardized test. And because those kids can't show it on this one standardized test that I have tremendous concerns about, we're saying you don't get a diploma, because you're saying we're identifying them now as juniors. We in this district, we identified them as 3rd graders, and we've always had those programs in place. But you're using one high stakes test that we know had gaps in it, that we know the curriculum did not, adequately measure, did not adequately prepare them for. And you're saying what you didn't get for 10 years, you've got a year, and you're saying that's not cramming. But to me, that's cramming. That's trying to get them to simply pass a test that you guys have arbitrarily, as far as I'm concerned, determined this is going to be your high-stakes test.
So
and I'm sorry, I know you don't agree with me, but that's really, I feel very passionately that that's what we've done here.
So I would say there are 2 pieces to that. One is, if you have been doing that work since 3rd grade, then you aren't, in fact, cramming information into the students. And the other part is, I'll just keep reminding us, they don't have to pass the kneecap. They don't. They can they can show it on other measures beyond kneecap. And if all of those fail, students have access to a waiver. So if Mr. Rearick feels that there's a body of information that shows those kids have a level of math that is comparable to being partially proficient on the kneecap, they can get a diploma. So we're not holding anybody back because of one test.
Could we skip to 6 then, since
Sure.
we're kind of there?
Yeah.
You're saying that if Mr. Rearick feels we can get a waiver, that he can give it, but the waiver process has not been approved, the waiver process has not come to
Described to
us,
us.
it's not been
Well, that's
described.
why I asked, could you clarify, could you explain how it works? Because we're not clear.
And we've heard some conflicting statements that parents have been reassured, oh, don't worry, your student will qualify for a waiver, just ask for it. And we've been told at professional development for school committees, it's going to be a very, very rare occurrence
Yeah.
for a student
We
to
were
get
at
a
the
waiver.
conference when they said
So,
that. We were
yeah,
there.
and more than once.
Oh,
more than-
yes,
So
yes.
there seems to be a conflict there as well between, oh, your student will certainly qualify, reassuring parents, and telling school committees, oh, this is going to be, scarce as hen's teeth, these
So I would say, so
waivers.
if you have about 40 students who are at level 1 right now, I would agree. I would not say that, oh yeah, 30 of them will go through the waiver. I don't think that's the intent. I think the intent is that you want to make sure that they're getting all the support that you've described that they're getting. You want them to retake the kneecap, or bank another score. You want to make sure that they have passed all their courses, that they've done their senior project. All those other things, all those other pieces are part of the waiver process. They have to have met all those other requirements of the diploma process. The one part that isn't met is that they haven't demonstrated proficiency on a standardized measure, whether it's the kneecap or some other assessment. Yet, there's a body of evidence that the teacher's principal can sign off on, saying, you know what, this child has the math that they need. They deserve a diploma. It's intended for that profile of student. So it isn't a wide group. It's not something that you would just say, oh, we're not going to worry about this. All 40 kids will go through the waiver process. I don't think that's the intent at all. But I know that Andrea and her team are working on the guidance for that, and I believe that's coming out shortly.
So you do not yet have guidelines for school committees as to under what circumstances we could grant waivers?
I don't believe it's out yet.
I find that very disturbing. We're holding the kids to this accountability. We've instituted the system. We have to go forward to it, and we don't have all of the pieces in place yet. How is that justifiable? You're laying out a system that's not complete and saying, you have to do it. But you can't tell us what we have to do yet.
I think it's coming out within the next couple of weeks.
And I think that's too late.
I mean, I know I'm a junior parent, and if you're, I have a child who has to start looking at colleges, has to start filling out things for scholarships, has a senior project, has, honestly, prom, his last homecoming, he has his senior year. And you're saying to parents, well, there is a waiver process in place, but we don't really know what it is. Well, if I'm a junior parent and I'm trying to decide, maybe I don't want my son to even be in public school next year, because maybe I think this high-stakes testing really is not an adequate measure for him, and I want to move him out so that he's ensured of getting a diploma. I don't have all the information that I need to make that decision as a junior parent. I certainly can't move him out in March of his senior year. So I think I share Mrs. Herman's frustration, not only as a school committee member, but as a parent, when I'm trying to make these decisions for what's in the best interest of a child, and RIDE didn't have all the information together. RIDE didn't have all, I mean, one of the complaints I've also heard is the fact that we're even doing it junior, senior year. Many of the other Massachusetts, New York, they do it sophomore, junior year.
So they don't have to go through that.
So they don't have to go through that their senior year. But I find it very frustrating that I'm hearing, yes, there's a waiver process, and if Mr. Rurick feels, and if the LEA wants to, but yet we don't even know what, we don't know what the guidelines are, and we're being told it's going to be very rare. And if I'm a junior parent, and I'm trying to make a decision for what's going to happen for my child, and I don't have all the pieces in the place, that's really a shame. That's unfair to those students, and that's unfair to those parents.
So I will get that date to you certain, but I think there are things that you can start doing. You can make sure that in fact, that kids have to meet all the other requirements of the diploma system. They have to have exhausted going through the 2 kneecap testings, the one in the junior year, the retest in their senior year. And they have to have demonstrated some level of support to try to do something between their junior year and senior year. And then with that, it's what evidence would you want to see within your own district to make you feel confident that students have the body of knowledge. Those pieces are for sure.
So the LEAs have a little bit of flexibility as far as...
Absolutely.
Okay.
But it's not enough for the students to have just passed their math courses? I mean, if I'm looking for other evidence that the student has math skills because it's a student who does not do well on standardized tests, first thing I would look at is that student's math grades. So if that student has passing math grades for his or her math courses, then that would qualify them for a waiver?
I don't think so, because we know that grading systems are not comparable, that one teacher's B is not another teacher's B. And so part of what the waiver would be is what are those measures that you implement to make sure that what they know is consistent from classroom to classroom.
So basically, we have to have a standardized test. You're saying no, you don't, but what you're really saying is yes, you do. Because how else are we going to show that?
Well, I would say there's standardized tests in a kneecap way or AccuPlacer way, but I think there are other things that I understand you're doing, and they're looking at curriculum embedded measures. What are those kinds of things that if you're in Algebra 1, for instance, what are those things that all Algebra 1 teachers ask their students to do? Common assessments.
Which we have,
Okay.
by course.
But until they've actually made until they've come out with the guidance for
We're
it,
just
we really
hearing
we don't know.
one opinion.
Absolutely.
Mr. Burgundy, do you have anything?
No, I'm fine.
Okay.
The second, going back to question 2, and this has been asked a number of times, but can the kneecap results get sent to the schools prior to the following February?
No, we've talked with Measured Progress about that. When they're scored, because we have so many what are called constructed response questions, where kids don't just fill in a bubble, they actually have to show their math. there are literally hundreds of people who are trained, and they correct all the papers at one time. So all the 11th grade and 12th grade work is scored simultaneously. So there's really not an opportunity to get the 12th grade scores done any quicker.
So they're going to do a short exam, my understanding is in March. How quick are we going to get
Those are
those
going to be
before they even
quicker.
graduate?
Those are quicker, because then it's not 3 states. It'll be, they'll be taking them in February and March. I think it's the last week of February, first week of March, and I think there's a 3-week turnaround.
Now,
And again, this would be for students, the second, they take it in October
of their senior year.
in their senior year. That's assuming they don't have the bank scores.
Yeah.
It's assuming that they don't have the
don't,
bank
right.
scores, or they don't show improvement.
Right, that they don't have the improvement.
Right.
The growth, in October, come February. Then
That's
they would
right.
take the next.
That's right.
The second test.
That's right.
So just kind of going back to question 6, even though
Yep.
the regs haven't been sent out to us or finalized, that's all incumbent on, the child never getting the bank score or showing the statistical. growth.
Correct. Correct.
So that'll be about 3 weeks.
Yes.
Now, has the RIDE realizing that one of the things that they said was AP, and AP they don't even get the AP exams back until July. Are they going to scrap that as an alternative? Which, I mean, they really should, because a child who doesn't get a 1 on a kneecap is not going to be taking, for the most part, AP
One would think
cap.
that.
So it'd be kids who take AP classes in their junior year.
Oh, so they'd have to take AP
They have
Calc
to
as
take AP Calc as
juniors.
juniors,
Some
but the curriculum-
students.
Some students do.
But usually they're.
They're not scoring ones
They're
on
not
their
scoring
kneecap.
ones.
Yeah.
I mean, we do have juniors, for example, who take AP US history their junior year.
Right, but the way that
And English.
the sequencing,
Right.
you wouldn't take AP
You
Calc
wouldn't
at
take it.
Tiverton until your senior year. The
You-
sequencing wouldn't support
If you
it.
had a very gifted child, they could take it.
Yeah.
You'd recommend they take it.
Yeah, but that would be
Because anyone can take an AP test anytime.
extremely rare.
I agree with you. I think that the
Before
notion
senior.
that the AP
Yeah.
test is going to
No.
help is pretty
That-
rare.
that-
I
yeah.
would, yeah.
That's right, thank you.
So of the tests, I mean, if I was a student in this situation, or a parent of a student in this situation, I'd be trying to figure out, okay, what test am I gonna get back the fastest that he's most, or she's most likely to pass, so that I can, move on to other things or redouble my efforts?
Yep. I would say if you,
How fast do you get an acuplacer?
I'd say
if I would say acuplacer, if you believe your child has the math that they need. If not, your best bet, I think, is making sure that they are enrolled in support programs the remainder of their junior year, over the summer between junior and senior year, and then the clearest, most direct path, their best chance at that point is to retake the kneecap and demonstrate some level of growth.
'Cause it's actually not achieving the 2, it's actually growth.
Yeah.
Which, I forget exactly
Yeah.
what the.
Which is a different profile of student than you feel like they just did badly on the kneecap, but they really know the math, then I would give them the acuplacer earlier. But otherwise, it's just another, it's not going to help.
The concern, though, is the 3.5-month limbo period,
Right.
which
Yeah.
essentially
I-
is 50% of the senior year.
Yeah.
Measured progress has got to do a better job. We also have instructional impacts. If we have students in the remedial programs, if we knew, say, 3 weeks later that they received statistical improvement or a 2, we could go from 10-to-1 teaching ratio to 5-to-1. That's
Yeah,
got to get done.
that
you know?
really
So we're
doesn't
gonna
seem an
shift.
acceptable-
Come October, we're shifting right to acuplacer.
Yeah.
We can't wait till February 1st.
Yeah.
I mean, timely
We
feedback,
can give acuplacer 2 or 3
is
times
critical.
potentially.
Right.
The kids are going to be testing right through February 1st.
Right, and I mean, it is.
They've got to do a better job.
It's a
Measure
huge
progress.
resource.
This is a graduation requirement. They've got to understand it. They can't treat them like the juniors anymore.
Well, and we have kids who aren't going to have space for art, who aren't going to have space for music, who aren't going to have space for tech ed. I mean,
already
so we're shifting, what things that they may have wanted to take their senior year.
Well, as part of our graduation, they have to have 4
They have to have
of
4 years of math
So
to
that's-
graduate.
So
Right.
they already have the math anyway.
You mean
Right.
extra though,
A
right?
lot
Well,
of
I
these
mean
kids-
extra.
so
I mean the
A lot of these
extra.
kids, the ramp-ups would take.
Yeah, they're
that
extra.
They had scheduled for,
Right.
will take away electives that they could possibly
But
take.
the point is that they have a sword hanging over their head for 3 months that they don't need to have hanging over their heads. And that frees up other resources to then take the kids who didn't show their growth or achieve the 2 to then sort of redouble their efforts to go the next time. So, you know, it really doesn't seem acceptable that you take a test in October and you don't get a result in February. There's not much that works in society that way that actually would stay in business very long. So I'm not sure why they do. I've taken board certification exams in medicine and I get a much quicker result.
Well, and quite frankly, we've had 4 years to work on this, and we didn't go to measured progress and say we need it quicker. It makes no sense
have.
to me.
And we know from classroom assessments that timely feedback is critical, and 3 months isn't a timely feedback. We have kids who are working extra hard in math. If they can take an Accuplacer and even see, because they'll get their results the same day, I believe they can get them, and see, okay, well, I didn't hit the cut score yet, but look, I'm 5 points higher than last month. I'm going to work real hard for 1 more month and get the additional 5 points. It's a real motivator. If you have to work and work and work and you have no idea if you're making any improvement because you have to wait for a kneecap, and then once you take it, you don't know if you've made improvement for 3 months. I mean, I think I agree with Dr. Larkin. As a parent, I would tell my student, you prepare for the Accuplacer and you take it every 3 weeks until you get the score you need.
Well, and that's my question. Can a retake of the Accuplacer count? Like, how many times do they get to take it?
I don't know what the rules are for, I don't know the testing conditions for retake, but I would tell you for sure, having a kid retake a test every 3 weeks would not be good practice.
So you don't know what the rules are, just to
For
be clear,
Accuplacer,
retakes.
In the documents that you have,
Yeah.
that came from RIDE, it doesn't
I'm
just
saying
talks
we-
about the scores and the cut scores.
Yeah, I would say
Doesn't limit how many times they can
Doesn't
take the
mention.
Accuplacer. So we would leave it up to the
it's up to the
teachers.
teacher and
The
student.
teachers, right.
Can I just clarify one other thing? So one of the reasons why they don't get the test score back is because they have to show the work. So I'm assuming that they have a workbook or something that they have to sort of show that they added the numbers or somehow.
They're multi-step
Through the
problems, and
graph.
kids have to, like, either draw a graph or solve a problem, and they write up their explanation. I think, this was my approach. They're explaining their thinking. They're more complex than just solving a straightforward algorithm. So measured progress brings in hundreds of people with math degrees. They're trained on how to score the work, and they literally correct thousands and thousands of kids' papers.
All across, for all states.
For all the,
And that was part of
Well,
that was part of the,
then it's really
that's
no
part of
longer an
the- yeah.
objective test.
that was part of the,
there are rubrics, so for every math question,
It's no longer an objective test.
and that was part of the complaint, Jerry, is
Yeah.
that we're taking
Right.
kneecap that wasn't supposed to
It's
be an
not
exit
supposed to be.
exam, and we're making it an exit exam.
Well, I can
And part
talk
of
to
that
that.
is
It's
the February,
Sorry.
no, so that, people have said that it wasn't designed to be a graduation test. I will tell you that when you're developing a test, and I'm one of the lead designers for the park assessment, and that's going to be a graduation test for 20 states, you don't design the test itself any differently. What you design is the process around it. So the kneecap test would not have been designed as a test any differently. It would still have constructed response items, that's still fair game. What's different is the retest opportunities, and that's what we've built. That's the $1 million being spent to build a retest form to give kids multiple opportunities to take the test. That's the part that was not contemplated back in 2004 when the kneecap test was built.
and the problem, and again, that's the problem, is the process wasn't built as an exit exam. The process, whether it is,
Right.
the process is not adequate, because it's not given sophomore year, junior year, like all of the other exit exams I've seen. It's not, you give the exit exam, the MCAS, and they get it in
They take it in the
fairly
spring.
They
quickly.
take it in the spring, they get it in
May,
August. They
yeah.
get it before the start of the
Before
next
the
school year.
start. Right, so I think that's part of the problem is, we had 4 years and we didn't build a process that worked to benefit the students and would have been timely and that would have benefited them, and we're sort of making, and I said this at the last meeting, we're taking a square peg and we're trying to fit it in a round hole, and that's frustrating for students, it's frustrating for parents, it's frustrating for administrators and school committee members.
I think question 3, we've already answered,
Yep.
Mary Ann's answered.
Yep.
and no need to be redundant.
Yep.
Mary Ann, this came a couple times, and it's kind of like where we are now in our conversation right now, is
Yeah.
a child goes through the whole process and meets all the local requirements, whatever district it is. They did their senior project, whatever. But they haven't shown statistical growth, and they don't qualify, under worst case scenario, they don't qualify for the waiver. What districts do with those children? That is, they've taken their 4 years of English, they've taken, and passed them, and done all the requirements that the local school committee feels is important, plus what RIDE is, put forward in the BEP. What do we do with those kids? Or what would a district do? I don't want to say us, but what would districts do?
So one of the things we've looked at is how many kids without any graduation requirements are not graduating now. And so right now, there are, of the about 10,500 seniors in any given year, about 1,500 of them do not graduate. And that's without any requirements. Some of them stay on for a fifth year and need that 5 years of high school in order to get ready. So when you look at our graduation rate from 4 years to 5 years, it goes up because some kids just needed that extra year. And then even in Massachusetts and even in all those other states that have done things like this for many years before Rhode Island started, there are some kids who are not going to get a high school diploma. And that is just what happens when you have a certain set of level of expectations, and that's the part that brings credibility back to our diploma system, that people understand this is the bar that you have to meet in order to qualify for a diploma in Rhode Island.
They can be awarded a certificate of attendance, is that correct?
At the state level, no. There are students who qualify for the alternate assessment. That's 1% of the population. And there are students who have special needs who don't even have a different curriculum. Those students get certificates of attendance.
So after they've done everything that we talked about, you're going to judge and value a student on one subject in one test.
I'm not.
Well, you're going to say he can't graduate if he can't pass it,
But
right?
there are also some number of students who are not passing the reading test. So when all is said and done, I would imagine that there are some number of students who, despite remediation and support, the waiver process, because the waiver process is also saying, as a school committee, you're saying, we've looked at evidence on this child, and we cannot say with any assurance that they are reading and or doing math at a level that makes it possible for us to give them a diploma that signifies that they have this level of reading and math under their belts. And that's what it's saying.
Did you finish the questions, Mr. Barrett?
Those are the questions. that I have.
Will the park eventually replace the kneecap?
sorry.
I think she answered.
Yeah,
that.
it
The
will.
answer is yes.
It will.
My question on that, though, is, so we're going to have juniors who are going to have to take the kneecap and the park?
I think yes, so
And
for
why would
1
we
year.
do that?
Um,
Why wouldn't we just say parks in place, let's take park? Why would we make them take two?
So for the graduating class of,
It's the freshmen, right?
It's my daughter.
no,
Yeah, it's your daughter's class, it's the freshman class. Why would we insist?
she won't
that-
have to, she won't have to. It's
She won't
kids
have to take
who
that.
are sophomores right now.
No,
So
she's a freshman.
okay, so maybe it's freshmen now.
Yes.
It's fresh, it's the current freshman class. Believe me, it's burned in like,
It's burning your brain.
on a
And
refrigerator.
I guess I'm just, what's the thought process if we're transitioning to park and park's now in place, why in the world would we make these kids take two?
Because when she is a junior,
She
the
won't have
course
had
that she wouldn't have had
the full common
the
core.
also, when she's a junior, the graduation requirements in Rhode Island say that kids need what's comparable to a 10th grade level of math. That's Algebra 1 and
Pull up another
geometry.
chair, Trish, if you want. Quick for
So,
that.
so it's Algebra 1 and geometry. When she's a junior, with the park, she'll probably be in Algebra 2.
So then just give them the kneecap and
She'll
not
be
the
in
park.
geometry. The
I mean,
track
why
design.
make them take?
She'll be
both?
in geometry?
Well, actually, geometry's next year. She'll be in Algebra 2.
That's what I'm saying.
I guess my
Yeah,
point is.
So
that-
I'm saying, so she would take her Algebra
Yeah, she'll
2.
be Algebra
Algebra
2.
2 isn't even part of our graduation requirements.
So then just have her, I guess I don't understand why we're just, pick one.
Right,
If-
because
if
it's
the
so
kneecap-
many hours of
Yeah, if
standardized
it's the
testing.
kneecap curriculum that they learned, then okay, we'll have them.
So the way that the park is designed is that if she, so we'll still, stay with Bill's daughter. She would take the kneecap for graduation requirements, because that would measure 9th and 10th grade math, Algebra 1 and geometry. Algebra 2 with Park is designed as an end-of-course assessment. So in her junior year, she would not have to take a final exam, if you will. That the Park Algebra 2 could be her final exam. So it's not more testing, it's a replacement of testing.
So, but, excuse me, so you're saying the 10 hours of, or 5 hours of Park math testing would take the place of an hour and a half final exam?
It's
Some people
not
will
10
be more
hours.
comprehensive.
It's much more comprehensive, and the other part about Park is that colleges and universities have said that kids who do well on the Park exam will automatically go into credit-bearing courses. So kids who would typically have to take other things when they get to college to show that they can read and write and don't need remedial work would not have to take those. So Park,
In fairness, some colleges are saying that, some aren't. It's just like the SAT.
Right.
Some
because
colleges
nobody's
take
taken the Park
SAT
yet.
and
Right.
ACT, some don't. So in fairness, not all colleges are saying that, so.
So your expectation is then, when students are taking the Park exam, that we'll no longer have final exams in our math
She said it could be
classes?
used.
they
as-
could be used.
Because they're given they're like AP.
They're given in May. Is that it? They'll be
There's one
given in
part, there's a,
One's in March, one's in
Jan-
May.
March and May.
2 parts.
Well, and those Park exit exams are mandated. So we'll need to, I guess, discuss as a school committee if in fact we do want
Well,
to.
you can use it as a waiver. That's if we get the
Right.
results back fast enough.
Well,
and you will, with
Oh,
the Park,
No, I mean that.
yeah, no,
No.
I know, it's a very good point.
Facetious.
Right.
so the way that the Park is designed, the March portion is the constructed response, the part that takes longer to score. They would start being scored in March, April, and May. The part that kids take in May is a computer, like, selected
Right.
response, Scantron. You can turn it around, so you'll put the March testing results and the May testing results together so that you can give the scores back quickly.
You'd have them by June.
Okay, would you like to open it up to the parents now, please? Thank you.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Tricia Mikowski. I actually have 2 juniors, both of which did not meet their partial proficiency for the math portion by a couple. I have a simple question. First of all, with the kneecap retake, will they have to take just the math at that point? Or
Yes.
okay,
It's just what
that's
they
the easy question.
Yeah.
The more difficult is, you were just discussing as far as, and this is my big fear, and I actually, when I met with Mr. Fazette, had brought this up. Worst case scenario, I would love to think that they will do the acuplacer, they will do it well, and I won't have to worry about whether or not they pass the kneecap again. But as a parent, of course, I have to think of all scenarios.
Sure.
And knowing both their history and math, it is not something, they do struggle with math. Over the past 3.5, going into 4 years, they have dedicated their time, their effort to make sure they achieve what they need to achieve. When you had mentioned, each teacher might grade differently, I can see how in some subjects that may be the case. In math, it's kind of black and white. You either get the answer right or you don't. My daughter has had the same average in her math throughout, regardless of what teacher she had. It is a difficult class for her. When she has always had A's and B's, okay, she more than meets the criteria to graduate. So when you sit here and say we have to consider whether or not this child is ready for graduation, that's a huge personal insult, because both of these children have done everything that they need to do to meet their requirements. Does it take them more effort? Absolutely. Do they give up? No, they don't. And in my eyes, that's a much truer measure of how successful they will be in future.
Absolutely.
Not whether or not they sit down for a kneecap that is timed, that they need more time. They need to make adjustments for the children who are not, and I don't know what the right term is, but the children that need that extra time, need that extra effort to be able to still achieve this. They'll be able to achieve it, and they've always been able to achieve it. It's whether or not they have the proper support there for them, and that kneecap is not giving them that support. So in the end, comes graduation time, and they've done all the things they need to do, and they have more than met all their requirements, and I go sit down with Mr. Eric and say, is my child going to graduate? At that point, do I get a waiver?
That's Mr. Eric's decision. So I'm
I'm
saying,
giving you an example
I-
of this type
so
of
I'm saying
situation.
if-
I'm not
if-
saying you're going to tell me yes or no, but I'm saying as an example.
Yep.
The struggle is specifically in math, okay?
so what I've heard you say, just to be clear, is that, so they, math is a struggle, but they hang in there.
Correct.
They've done.
And they pass it.
And they're
every single
passing, they're
quarter with
getting-
either a B
Yep.
minus. I mean, to
Yep.
push for that 81 is a big deal, but
Yep.
once they go over that 80, I'm doing cartwheels.
Yep.
But it is with staying after school, it's with, I mean, one of my daughters decided to do the math team this year.
Yep.
She's not a good math student, but that's the type, she wants to
Yep.
try to improve her skills as best as she can. So for me to say that that child is not going to graduate,
Yep.
or is not, maybe should not be considered ready to graduate, is very, very insulting, because I see the effort that
I'm
comes
not,
behind.
I'm not, what I'm saying is, I don't know every school district in the state that well, so I can't say with assurance, yes or no for every district. It wasn't about your children. What I'm saying is.
I understand that, but
so
I'm
I'm
not talking
saying-
about just mine, I'm talking about children
So what I'm
like
saying
mine.
is, Mr. Rurick and team are in the best position to make that decision. So if he
But
knows.
is that a possibility?
Of course it's a possibility.
That is what I
Of
want
course
to know.
it's a
I want to know
possibility.
that in the end, we'll go through all these hoops that we need
Yep.
to go to play the game, to get to where I need to be. I need to know that in the end, they're not going to get penalized because the system is not in place the way it should be.
So, no, if they know the math that they know, that they need to know, Mr. Rurick and team look at all their work and say, for whatever reason, kneecap is not registering the math that they know, then absolutely, that's exactly, precisely who the waiver is intended for.
Why, the other thing that I don't comprehend, it does not seem logical or right to me at all, is how you can take away every other component of the grading system, basically, just for this kneecap. How can you not look at it as a part, a piece of that whole puzzle? It's really the only piece that matters. I mean, I have had kids say to me, what does it matter? I'm not going to graduate anyway. We'll talk about next year. We'll talk about college stuff. What does it matter? I'm not going to graduate anyway. That's, I mean, that as a parent, knowing how much they try to be able to do, they're very, very focused and they want college.
Yeah.
And it's almost like somebody's telling them, you're not good enough now. And it's almost like they want to give up because everything they've done seems to not really matter that much. It's all based on this kneecap. So I don't comprehend how you can take just that one piece and make a whole assessment of this child and their abilities and capabilities.
I don't think we are. I think we're saying
I
that
think it's exactly what you're doing.
so if they're not showing in the kneecap, and you said they need more tests, so I'm assuming that they're getting that accommodation that they can take as long as they need to complete the test? Because the kneecap
Yeah,
isn't
and the
timed.
kneecap?
It's not a time test. If they need 3 hours to complete one session, they can have 3 hours to complete.
Okay, no, I do not believe that they were given extra time.
So they can have as much time as they need.
Okay.
So if they're given the test under the conditions that they need, they should have there's a whole list of accommodations. They should have access to all the accommodations that will help them demonstrate their best work.
Okay.
Okay? And after all of that, if they don't show significant improvement, like if they don't hit partial proficient, if they don't show growth, then they can take the acuplacer. If they don't register on that, that's when the waiver part comes in. And the teachers and the team can say, for your two children, the amount of math that they have deemed, for whatever reason, It's not registering on the kneecap, it's not registering on the Accuplacer, but we can sign off and say in good conscience, these kids are prepared for college. If that is their dream, they're going to have enough math to take the courses that they want. That's what the waiver process is intended to do.
Okay, and
It's
that's what I need to know. And if it's just, if it's like the school committee members have said, that it is such a rare situation that these waivers are going to occur,
Yeah,
and I've got two.
yeah.
So what are the chances
Yeah.
that that's going to be the case?
Yeah.
I would hope that my hope is that in the end, I think it's completely wrong. I'm just going to go on record saying I completely think that the way that it is set up is wrong. Not that there is an assessment tool. I believe there should be some form of assessment tool. The way that it is set up, I think, is completely wrong. And I think that it takes away so much, it puts so much additional pressure on these kids that they already have such huge pressures, way more than I ever did at their age. But if my hope is that in the end, whether or not they meet that requirement, that they in turn, and I say they, my school committee members and principals, et cetera, superintendents, will then look at the whole student. That is my hope. And be able to then say, yes, absolutely, she may not have met this, but she is more than ready for graduation, and she has done everything she needs to do.
Yep. And just know that, have they taken the Accuplacer yet?
No, not yet.
So that would be the other piece. I think one of the driving forces behind this is we checked in with CCRI and we said kids who don't meet like the cut scores for the Accuplacer, they are 75% of kids entering CCRI who have graduated in the past 3 years are spending all their student loan money on taking remedial courses. And that's why some standardized measure is being introduced. So if kneecap is not working, then Accuplacer. So even if your students don't register an Accuplacer, but the team still feels that they have enough math, if they go to CCRI or Rhode Island College or URI, they might still have to take remedial classes. And that's the part that we are trying to circumvent so that people aren't wasting student loan money taking remedial courses. And that is the driving force behind this.
But and I respect that, but it can be done. There are, for those kids that it is a struggle and that's never going to change,
Yep,
as if there's the support there and they do the tutoring help,
yep.
they're capable of meeting that. So
Yeah.
I just don't want to see them penalized for something that
Right.
they are willing to make the effort to achieve their goal,
Yep.
as difficult as that may be. But just sitting down on a standardized test with a lot of material that they have not necessarily taken classes for yet, is not, really representative at all of the type of students that are being affected.
I hear you.
We've come back to this question of a waiver, and I would like to reassure you that since your students have done well in their classes and can do the math, that we would be able to grant waivers. We have no guidance from RIDE. I'd like to know how much autonomy we have as a district to grant those waivers. Or if we grant 4 waivers, are we going to come under intense scrutiny from RIDE and have to go sit for 3 hours and be grilled as to why we granted the waivers? What kind of system is this going to be?
I don't think you're going to be grilled by RIDE for the number of waivers that you give. I think it's up to the district to say, you've made the decision, you are signing off on the level of math and or reading skills that kids have. And that's what I believe the waiver process is asking the school committee and the superintendent to do.
So ultimately, we do have the authority and the autonomy to grant any and all waivers we see fit.
Yes.
Well, we don't know what the guidance is yet.
Well,
But-
no, we were just,
It may be guidelines, but we have the autonomy and the authority to grant any and all waivers we see fit.
All due respect to Mary Ann, let's wait for the guidelines. But they haven't been
I have a
written.
feeling there may be some.
They're in draft. I don't think, they're not, the drafts that I've seen don't say no more than X percentage. It's not putting that kind of cap on them.
could I just clarify with either Steve or Bill? She's saying any accommodations can be made that need to be made. Do those need to be documented IEP accommodations, or can
No.
a teacher, can a
No,
parent just come
and
in?
the students were consolidated. We check in with every room. If
Okay.
students need additional time,
Okay.
they're consolidated
So it doesn't
until
have
the
to be
student-
part of an IEP?
The last
No.
student finishes the last problem that they're attempting to take.
You
Okay.
stay in the testing cycle.
So you can do things like, and just to be really clear, you can, the test is designed to take about 50 minutes. We tell everyone to plan for an hour and a half. So we give them extra time. But if you know that some students are going to take much longer than that, we would say give them a small group administration and just plan to have them in a room, maybe it's 10 kids, and they could have up to 3 hours if they wanted, with frequent breaks.
Is it just the timing, though? Let's say we have a student who has a language processing, and he can't, if he reads a word problem, the word problem doesn't make sense, but if you said to him, if you gave him the word problem in a different way, we cannot do
You
that.
can't do that.
Can't do that.
You can read the math test to them, though.
But you can just read what it says. You
can't
cannot,
You can't interpret
you
it.
can't rephrase it, so you
No.
can read it and you can give more time, but you cannot rephrase it.
Right.
Thank you.
Marianne, some of the things you seem to be alluding to were part of the PBGR system originally.
Right.
The ability of a local district's common assessments to replace a student's kneecap score, which at that time would never override graduation back in '08. And I believed at that time, the language was that if a district had an approved graduation system under PBGR, that if a student was not proficient on the kneecap, that the common assessments of that approved district in the area of English or math would be acceptable to look at as an alternative at that time. That's been taken away, to my knowledge. So the common assessments were something
were.
that everybody strived for.
But we can still use
Yeah.
them.
I think that could be a piece of
That could be
evidence, but
part
not
of
the
the
sole
evidence to
evidence.
go
Well, it
towards that.
drove us, believe me, it drove us, because for the last 4 years, we've had this practice in place to have the students who didn't get a 2 as juniors retake it.
Yep.
And we placed them in a math course in their 4th year, not a math-related, in a math course, because we knew that our common assessments in that math course were acceptable on a state-approved graduation system. So that drove us. So I feel, to a degree, that we have certainly done everything that's been asked of us on behalf of the students, on behalf of the staff, and on behalf of the curriculum.
Yep.
And now that piece did get taken away.
Actually, too, my name's Jennifer Hughes, I'm a parent here, and I'm going to apologize because this is very emotional, but on the back of Mr. Fizzett, I am highly insulted that any teacher that my son has, who was a junior here, would be, the fact that you talked about teachers having different, I don't know what the word was, fees or something, that these professionals their grades aren't accurate measurements of the student's performance is highly insulting, because I have spent, since 3rd grade, I have pushed my son, he has a language processing thing, STEM, issue. This kid has been tutored every summer. He participated in the programs that Mr. Fizzett has put into place here with, I don't remember how many, 8, the tutoring after school, missing his athletics because this is a priority. They also offered, a few of the teachers were kind enough to offer SAT preps. He did that. He has a language processing issue. Now, you said you have a special ed degree. I'm insulted that you think my son, first of all, hasn't been exposed to the math. After finishing his 3rd year here at the high school, he's finishing Algebra 2. He does struggle, but he has always carried at least a B in his math. He's being exposed to it. He is performing mostly on a daily basis. He is a 17-year-old teenage boy. The fact that the state of Rhode Island would take 3 or 4 days in October of his junior year to measure his performance for 4 years of high school graduation is outrageous. You talk about testing, and I'm looking because you were talking about medical exams. Quite honestly, if I'm taking my child to the emergency room for a life-threatening circumstance, I don't care that this doctor got a 4 on his kneecap. I care that in a situation, he's going to respond, and getting a 4 on a kneecap or getting whatever the high score would be in a medical exam would not guarantee that that doctor is going to do the best medical service to save that child's life. The fact that we talk about diversity in education. Unfortunately, fortunately, I have 3 children.
Depends on the day.
But unfortunately, my youngest has been pulled out of the public schools, and I can't tell you how upset, because, I have been a pain in the neck in these schools, starting with, Mrs. Wardell, who was my elementary principal. I put everything into it. I feel like all I do is defend the Tiverton School District, and I put everything into it. And now I've been trying to educate myself. I've been in contact with Andrea, and I really do feel for you in the position you're in, because I know you're trying to represent your
Employer.
your office, and I know your hands are tied. I've made contact with. I've actually sent letters to all of the Board of Educators. I've been in contact with some of them on the phone, who I was surprised when you asked the question about the February. I was told by the member of the Board of one of the board members, she couldn't believe that we were going to wait until February. What you're not really, and it's coming from the commissioner right down, these are students. These are kids that have struggles every day to do what's right, to come to post-prom and not do something else, to show up for practice and to play a clean soccer game or a clean football game, to now come up with this senior project that's, a whole year. I'm very sad that you've stolen my son's senior year, because I don't care how many scores you can bank. He has a language processing issue. The fact that that you would take anybody at 17 years old and say, you can't pass this kneecap. I want to know, who made the kneecap the Bible? And the assessments, we had professionals in the state that took it and struggled. I just don't understand why you guys are putting so much effort, or you put so much faith in a test for 3 days or 4 days, I don't remember, in October, that really is affecting these kids' immediate futures. And now, not to have anything completely in place, like I am probably who Deb was talking about. I already had to pull one out of public school. I have looked into pulling my son out because he needs to get a diploma. He's done everything he can. But now he's going to be punished because he's not going to get to finish his senior year in a public school. And I'm sorry, with all due respect to the commissioner, I can't put my son's future in her hands. To wait for her to come up with waivers, to wait for her to give me an exam test back, I have no confidence. And he is going to be tutored. Mr. Fizzette has worked very hard with me because I'm not putting him in remedial classes. I think those kids, they need more one-on-one. It's only going to help him in college. That's how I'm looking at it. He's going to be tutored all summer. But I am not confident that he's going to get the score on the AccuFacer, that he's going to get the score on the kneecap. And it's not because he doesn't know it. But it really, you can defend it all you want, but it really, really is not accurate. And it's not, when people talk about MCAS, it's nothing in comparison to MCAS. Why you would do this, I just wish it was more thought out as far as maybe the sophomore year. If everybody's so concerned, if it's supposed to be only Algebra 1, if everybody's so concerned about these kids not getting the right math, why not do it earlier so that it can be classes and it doesn't have to be, complete tutoring or complete remedial. And but why is it the kneecap? Why really do you have this much faith? You even admitted in the beginning that you don't have the validity to
The predictive validity, if a child scores this level on the kneecap, this is what they will score in college. We don't have that kind of study. We do have studies that say kids who get this score on the kneecap get this score on the SAT. So kids who are scoring at the level that we want for partial proficiency is equal to about a 440 on the SAT. So we know we have those kinds of validity studies for sure. We have content validity. That means we are measuring what we said we're going to measure. What we don't have the money to do is to actually follow kids into college to say, kids who scored at this level on the kneecap scored this way in college. That's what we haven't done. I'm a mom. I get it. I would just tell you that I hope, even if all the adults around them, if your kids are hearing this, that you are not saying you're not going to graduate.
Absolutely not.
Good.
But what he
Is it-
is looking at me, when I said to him, we have to make some decisions, and I also has a freshman here, who's gonna, which is, you guys keep changing the curriculum. I mean, we have that Chicago math, which, you keep changing it. No wonder these kids are, fumbling, because everything keeps changing. There's no consistency. Right there, we show you some of the reason why. It's always new and improved. I'm a dental hygienist. Crest new and improved isn't any better than the Crest that was here 20 years ago. It's new and improved. 2 plus 2 is 4. And development is the same. Kids, I mean, unless I don't know anything different, the development of students really hasn't changed. What we're exposing our young children to has changed. And you said about the SAT, and I don't want to get into personal things, I don't want to bore people, but I can tell you I'm the oldest of 6. We all graduated from Tiverton High School. I don't know how many of my siblings would have passed kneecaps, but I can tell you every one of them have a college degree. They did not do great on SATs, not all of us, but we all have college degrees. We're all working. Thank God for my father. We're all working. I mean, the fact that you would take a 17-year-old, and what's going to happen to these kids? This is some of the kids are in high risk, so now what happens to them? They can't even join the Army. They can't go into the Marines because they don't have a high school diploma. I just don't think it's been thought out enough, and the more research or the things that I've read, I didn't realize that this all came about with the Race to the Top, and
This isn't part of Race to the Top.
that wasn't, part of Race to the Top wasn't
Not
a
a-
high stakes graduation requirement?
No.
That's not what I've read.
No,
And Artie
that's for sure.
Duncan also was quoted in April in a conference in California saying, he actually was quoted saying, maybe this high-stake test has gotten a bit too much. I think, maybe we're on the backlash of it. Massachusetts has been doing it for a long time. I know Texas has, my sister-in-law is involved with the Dana Institute. She's at UT in Austin. They've had backlash, and we're getting the last of it. So here we go. The poor kids in Rhode Island, aren't gonna, I know we're doing the parks now, but I just feel like we are failing our kids. And I don't think it's happening in the local district, at least in not this district, because they're getting everything they deserve. And I just don't get why you're gonna hold to the kneecap, which is only a couple of days in the whole high school career.
So I'll just keep saying, because it's not just the kneecap. They can take other tests to show.
But it's all tests. Like, not everybody performs well on a test, but it doesn't mean that you're not, you don't know how to, it's like you don't give somebody a driver's license because they can't see, but it doesn't mean they don't know the rules of the road, or they don't know, they can't perform because of their vision, but it doesn't mean that they don't know it. There's a lot of kids, there's especially a kid that knows because they know that this is what's happening. And some of these kids are the hardest, I shouldn't say that. These kids are part of the hardest working
They
kids
are.
in the school.
That's right.
And now you're asking
That's
them
true.
he's gonna lose another summer.
Yeah.
When he was supposed to be getting his senior project ready, he was gonna be interning with my husband because of what he wants to pursue in college. I want him, because he's a language processing issue, I want him to have experience, hands-on things, so he can see he wants,
What does he want to do?
He wants to be he really wants, you're gonna laugh, but like architectural engineering, construction management. He wants to go to a technical school. And he has the opportunity to be I want him on job sites, so he can see how jobs run. I don't want him working for my husband. And he can go to project meetings with my husband,
Right.
so he can, again, see. But we can't do that when we're spending hours tutoring. It's gonna limit. I just think we've lost. I don't think getting him to get 2 more points to be proficient on the kneecap is gonna make him successful in life. And I just thank you for listening to me. I appreciate your position. I really wish that we could have an audience with the commissioner, because I think she should be able to talk to these kids that this is affecting. But thank you.
Thank you.
Bill, or Steve, we talked a lot about the Accuplacer. When are we trying to administer that with BCC?
Right now, our plan is focused on the October kneecap.
Okay.
And then we'll shift students who are actually in the NPR class and then try to offer tutoring sessions immediately in November on the Accuplacer, because it's something we have to become familiar with as well. And then we're hopeful to try to get the first test in sometime in December for the Accuplacer.
So they actually won't be able to bank any score before they
December.
retake the fall kneecap?
Could if they wanted
Well,
to.
I mean, it's
Can
possible
they
that
take
we
them on
could
their own?
arrange
They
something
can
in
take them
September.
on,
That's
they can
what we're
take them on their
organizing.
own?
They
But
can.
Yeah, I mean, we could possibly see if BCC could just come in cold sometime in September,
Well,
I mean,
you know?
I think one of the advantages of having Mary Ann here was to clarify that Accuplacer question. Was because and we talked about it numerous times ourselves.
yeah, and maybe we
Should they
can
take it
talk
now?
at another
Should they
meeting.
take it now, and if they did, would it count? And
Yeah,
on and
so maybe
forth.
we can discuss all that.
So that's something we certainly could maybe accelerate.
Yeah.
Because we did get that clarification.
I did want to comment about the CCRI comment, because I know Mr. Pagani made this comment before. And it's sort of a, no offense, cherry-picking data, that it's not just Rhode Island that has so many kids that come in and need remedial math. It's countrywide. That Massachusetts actually has 68% that go into community college that need remedial classes. New York has a similar percent. Illinois, it's a phenomenon that's statewide, or that's countrywide, and I think it really kind of speaks to a lot of those students, more so less now, but a lot of those students really weren't on a college track, and so our community colleges do a fabulous job of providing sort of that track for them. So I don't want to, and remember that New York and Massachusetts both have exit exams. So to kind of use that fact to say, well, we need an exit exam because we have this many kids, and I'm not saying that's what she has said, but I have heard it stated in the past, that's really inaccurate. That's cherry-picking data and not really looking at the whole of the data. That really what it says is that as a nation, the kids going into community colleges do need remedial classes, and that an exit exam isn't going to necessarily fix that. There are lots of things that we need to focus on, because I think it is an issue as a country, but the exit exam isn't going to fix that.
And you really can't compare the two states at all, because I was in Massachusetts when it happened there, the ed reform in 1993, and the state was all in.
The
It was
MCAS?
professional development for the teachers, 120, all paid for, worked in the summer on curriculum, and Bill and Melinda Gates have the Gateway Foundation. So if you don't pass the MCAS, you can go to BCC for free until you can get in. If you don't pass it here, you go and pay. You can pay for 2 years or whatever your concern is. So you can't even compare the two states for what has happened. They opened up the whole library at Durfee High School, took the best English and math teachers out, put them in there for pre-test, post-test, Saturday school. I mean, it was just an amazing process. It's taken 10 years to where they've gotten. They did it very thoughtfully and very carefully.
So you don't see the support?
Oh, no. Oh, no. I mean, I'm astounded, to tell you the truth, at this whole thing. And as Mrs. Hughes said, I'm not going to tell, and I don't think any of us are going to tell that child. Someone else is going to have to tell them they can't graduate after they've done all those things. And that senior project is amazing, because they have to demonstrate, they have to work so hard. I was so glad when we put that in. And then community service to teach them to give back. It's such a well-rounded thing, and this narrows it so immensely that I'd just like to read after Mr. Aruda speaks. He's our liaison from the town council. So go ahead, Mr. Aruda.
Thank you, Mrs. Black. And just quickly before I begin, I just want to report that Lake Picasset is no more.
I know. We went by it Saturday morning.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So before I begin, I really don't have a lot of questions. More want to speak to my personal experience as a teacher from Massachusetts, as Mrs. Black was. And just to reiterate one point Mrs. Palash made, I did a little research before this meeting. And I have been out of teaching for roughly 5 years. And I saw the spokesman of the DESE, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education of Massachusetts, stated that they're looking at, at end of March, he gave an interview in an article saying that now that looking at no longer using the MCAS for their testing and moving also to a PARC. And that was as of end of March. I don't know if anything's changed. I didn't find anything, any updates to that effect. And some of the data that he mentioned to kind of to tag team on yours was that 75 to 85% of the students that have proficient or better on MCAS, 40% of them needed remedial, non-credit remedial classes in college. So Massachusetts is regarded as the best state in the union as far as standardized testing and data collection goes, and they are seeing that issue as well. And they've been doing that far longer, I think, than Rhode Island has. So that's one point to attack him on yours. And just one comment I heard about one teacher's B is not enough teacher's B, and you had the testing where it was more of a critical thinking, basically word problem, and how the student would demonstrate how they arrived to that solution. That grading process for that type of problem would also be subjective. So one score is 3 will not be another score is 3, possibly on the same student's test. And that's personal experience also for grading those type of problems for quite a few years. So some of the points I wanted to make, hopefully I want to first thank you for coming, and I know it's not easy being someone else's punching bag for a meeting like this. This is, a very passionate issue for a lot of us, a very emotional issue for a lot of the parents with their students involved, and it's not an easy issue for you to sit here and be the spokesman of RIDE. So thank you for that. So one thing I wanted to first point out, in Massachusetts when I was teaching, I started my career briefly in Somerset sub and full-time, and I moved over to Blackstone Millville Regional High School.
Sure.
And Blackstone Millville Regional High School is probably one of the best passing rates in the state. They're roughly 100%. And my first year of my tenure there, I taught physics there. So freshman classes were now beginning to take MCAS science tests. So when I first started, it was in their testing phase of the exam to collect data to see how the first initial polls of the test were coming in. Is the test too hard? Is it too easy? Are the scores skewed too proficient? Are they too much needs improvement? Are not enough kids passing? So that actually went on for a couple of years in testing phase before they actually implemented the test. Then they implemented the test roughly midway through my teaching there. And then what happened, the kids already knew the first day of school that now they're the class that has to pass the science MCAS along with the English MCAS and along with the math MCAS to graduate. So immediately as a freshman, 14-year-old kid now has to pass a freshman physics class that was supposedly geared for concept-based, but really can't take the math out of physics very much. So right away, there's certain math skills that are required to excel in that program. And you spoke about the gaps that you would see, and we will see the same things. There are gaps in some students that would lack some content-based knowledge, and I'll stop by some segues in content and coverage. So with that said, immediately there was a lot of pressure on some of the students to pass the exam. Some of them already had anxiety in September for the test in June. And I had to do my best to comfort them and say, don't worry about it right now. I've been through this a few times with the practice exams. I know what's going to be on, I have a good idea what's going to be on the exam. I know what's going to be asked of you. I'm going to give you the tools you need to pass it. And that was my first problem after I said that, was I'm going to give you the tools you need to pass a test. And that was my immediate problem. I'm like, okay, what am I doing? So before the test is given, we basically have, the school would do a 2-week period of preparation. Well, you have to do it. You have to do 2-week preparation for the exam to make sure these kids can pass the test. Because it reflects on the school's standings, what the rates are for passing. So you have needs improvement, you have proficient, and you have advanced. And they want to be in certain criteria for needs improvement, proficient, and advanced. And of course, the ultimate goal is to have 100% proficient, which is statistically impossible to achieve. basically. And I had students in that class, one of them in particular, who had an A- for the year in my class, and she failed the MCAS by 2 points. So it was the only student I had out of the 500-600 or so that had that issue. But that crushed me inside. It's like, how do I explain to her mother and her father, why didn't she pass the MCAS test when she had an A- in your class? So we sat down, and she's like, oh, I was so nervous to take the test. I don't really do well in these type of tests. I just got so nervous, I couldn't think straight, and I got to the word problems, and I started looking at the clock. I was starting to run out of time. Oh my goodness, I have to get this done. So immediately, a lot of the constraints of the test added a lot of unnecessary pressure to that one particular student. Now, I'm only talking about one particular student, and I had many hundreds of students. Mrs. Black had thousands of students, if not millions.
Millions.
And I had that problem in my one classroom in the small little high school. I would imagine there were thousands others that had the same type of issue. And the data you said tonight reiterated that my belief. 4,000 other students in Rhode Island also had a similar type of issue. They couldn't pass the exam for whatever reasons. Now, speaking of the test for itself, the problem I have with the test is it's only measuring a very narrow band of content. And the problem that we had as teachers in Massachusetts was coverage versus content. So we have the curriculum based in front of us with standards, mastery objectives, and activities, so on and so forth. We had to cover that entire curriculum by the end of June. Actually, before the test. We had to cover that entire curriculum before the test. And it was a large and aggressive curriculum. I'm not really familiar with the curriculum of Rhode Island, but in Massachusetts it was very aggressive, with a lot of subjects that take a long time for some students to even comprehend, never mind excel at them. So you're immediately faced with having to cover the material because you can't not cover it. You are liable for not getting to the material. You're automatically disqualified from meeting the goals for the student to be prepared, automatically, if you don't cover all the material. So the pressure is now on me to make sure I get through that entire curriculum. So what happens? I have to go thin on some of the content to make sure I can reach the end of that curriculum. So we actually run into a problem of coverage versus content. And the other thing that also happens, that I also noticed in the students that I had, is we're learning math and we have to learn this algebra for fractions, we have to learn long division in elementary school, we have to learn polynomial, binomial, all kinds of crazy things in math. Those have to be learned. But what doesn't happen is skills. And what I end up doing, I end up tutoring on the side. Actually, I work in Westport as a IT professional. I actually did some tutoring on the side for some students for MCAS help. And a lot of the issues that I would find, even for my own students, the majority of my own students, is they didn't know how to prepare themselves to learn. So one of the problems is how do I actually take the information out of this book and get it into here? That was one problem. And they didn't have the skills, like some of the basic study skills, just to work on their own. And a lot of the kids that I would have were dependent on me, very dependent on me. So the first month of my class was getting that out of their heads. You're not going to get any answers from me. You have to come up with the answer. I will guide you. I will give you the tools you need, but you have to get the answer. So there was a lot of frustration period in that first month of school. A lot of frustration.
And I think that's the national discussion, is that are we, with the use of standardized tests, limiting our curriculum, teaching to the test? Are kids too are they too worried about getting the right answer and not thinking about it? And that's the balance we need to achieve. We don't want to go to that extreme, and I certainly think that's a national discussion that's being had.
Right, and I think that's a problem here as well. You're faced with coverage versus content.
Right.
I think the Common Core did a nice job of trying to narrow the content so that when you're building curriculum, you're not racing through a million topics, that you're taking the time to do fewer things, but more in depth, and really make sure that kids have that deeper understanding and the skills that they need, so that teachers feel like they have that flexibility to do it. Because you're right, if we are teaching to the test, if our curriculum becomes test prep, we have failed miserably.
And that was starting to happen in Massachusetts. And the reason why it was sort of happening in Massachusetts is because guess what happens with the scores? They start coming up. So everything looks good. So unfortunately, you almost get, in a way, almost, it's not cheating, but you're starting to actually, in a way, cheat. And the 2 weeks before the test, I had to spend time teaching to the test.
Do we have any parents here tonight or Tiverton teachers who have some questions? I realize it's getting late. No, go ahead.
One last point Massachusetts is going through right now is as you're doing this testing, what do we do with all this data? And it's data collection is now becoming a big business in Massachusetts for all the testing. And well, how do we get this data delivered to the districts? So now there's computer systems now being developed in order to do that. So my fear with all that stuff, with the testing, now data collection, which I don't think Rhode Island's even begin to delve into yet.
We have.
Begun? Okay. You're gonna find that's a vast sea of variables. Is a lot of focus is now being put on testing and data, and the focus is now not being put on what do we teach these kids to succeed. And I work in private industry now. We're getting kids out of college. Some of them are very brilliant, but some of them actually still lack the skills in problem solving. As silly as that sounds, that is a blaring issue, even in business now, college kids coming out. So I think my message for Rhode Island would be, please don't put a lot of focus on testing on data. Let's try and find out a way to teach these kids the skills they need to actually succeed in their life, not so much on a test. So,
Thank you, Jim.
Can I say something?
Sure, Mr. Facundi.
We pay more attention to how to produce quality widgets than how to produce quality students. If in a factory, which is complete simplification, no one will say, we have a good product, but we cannot prove that this product actually meets particular criteria. So in terms of testing and trying to use some data, the whole world is basically driven by data-driven processes. You have to collect particular data, and based on that data, as opposed to someone's feelings, how people feel that we are doing great, let's just give ourselves a pat in the back, and this is a sign that we are going in the right direction. This is all done based on data. This is not going to change. Now, the question is obviously, like the gentleman said, what do you do with all this big, vast amounts of information? Well, technologies are being developed as we move along that people can make intelligent decisions and intelligent choices by computers and algorithms analyzing this data as opposed to someone looking at columns of numbers and trying to figure out what they actually mean. Another part of this is you don't collect any data unless you know what you are collecting and what purpose this is going to serve. That's basically the ABCs of process management. So this is happening here. This is new to many people because in teachers' professions, and I am also a teacher, we feel that we are doing a good job. And it's not necessary to collect any information and prove to us how we can improve things. And even the best teachers can do a better job. So now, obviously we are exposed to this. Everyone is out of the comfort zone because this is something completely different. But how else are we going to do it? Except based on data. Now, people say, well, it's unfair to students, etc. I understand all of this. I also have kids, and when they cry, I cry with them. And I had many students, and sometimes these students come and they are frustrated, and sometimes they are thinking about quitting because they cannot meet certain thresholds. But in the real world, in a college or workspace, no one is going to say, listen, Johnny, I know you cannot pass this test, physical test, as a fireman, but you really want to be a fireman, you're just going to get that job. No, you have to pass this test, and if you don't, you will not qualify to get it. In college, it's not going to be you cannot pass a math test, so maybe you can draw a picture. it's not going to happen. Yes, you are going to be frustrated. Yes, some people will not finish. What's unfair is to deceive the students that they are graduating from the high school and you are going to be successful in this outside world, which is post-high school education. And you will not. So all these dropout rates, the students who spend tons of money and now they get nowhere, this is unfair. So setting up the system when you say, listen, these are the expectations, how do we bring you over there? With all support system we can. And part of this is not using, I understand the opposition to what's happening, but the opposition is very simple, should never involve the kids. We said, you are going to make it. Now the question is, how do we make sure that this happens for everyone who will try? And these are all very legitimate questions, but to tell the kids and scaring the kids, like some people are trying to do it, well, go and protest here or there because you are not going to get your diploma. I don't think this is the right way of doing it. Obviously, we have legitimate questions. We have to answer all of these questions, but I don't see any other way. I'm not saying that we should bet on that particular test or any other particular test, but there has to be some testing. Some data has to be collected, and this has to be used as a feedback. This is just common sense to me.
I agree with you there, Mr. Burgundy. My name's Kim Sutherland. I agree with you that there need to be checks and balances and that testing needs to be done, but the testing needs to be done responsibly and it needs to be used as a tool and not as a weapon against our children. And I really feel that what this testing is doing is being used against them as a weapon because it's so high stakes. Einstein had a saying that said, if you tell a fish to climb a tree, it's going to spend its entire time thinking it's stupid. There's more than one way to get things done, and a high-stakes test cannot be the be-all, end-all. There have to be other ways. As a special needs teacher myself, we do a lot of great work with special needs students with portfolios. Portfolios allow students to still show what they know, even if it's not done in a traditional way. So I take point to what you're saying about, these kids aren't cogs. You're right, they're not cogs. We can't treat them like a business. We can't run our schools like it's a business because it's not. These are children. They're not things. And when we see that private schools are having success with turning out students who are ready for college and ready for, whatever trade they want to go into, and they are not required to take a high-stakes test to graduate their students, then we have to say to ourselves, well, maybe the testing isn't what needs to be done to make sure that our kids are successful.
Thank you, Kim.
And this
Thank you.
discussion, obviously, we had this discussion with Mrs. Hughes, and in my opinion, the problem is that we don't do a job good enough, and part of this is financial reasons that the public school systems don't have the resources necessarily to do it right with kids who probably who need different type of approach to actually process the information, and using some alternative ways of teaching, especially those who require intensive technology involvement, they are not available here. So to some extent, this is the mainstream of students who are moving here through our system, and sometimes people who know that some student, like in discussion with Mrs. Hughes, I don't think it's a problem with testing. I think it's a problem with not being able to teach this child. And obviously, there are alternative ways of testing whether you have these skills and you don't. And obviously, part of these questions, all of these questions have to be answered by right. How are you going to prove to me that this is an honest and a true test of skills, as opposed to just quote-unquote, one way of asking the question to everyone regardless of how they process the information. These are legitimate questions, but I don't think we should attack the fact that all of a sudden we are going to use data to maybe make some changes.
I don't think anyone is. I think I'm hearing that effective and meaningful data assessments are really helpful, and I know many of our teachers do really good assessments, reading assessments, math assessments on a yearly, annual basis, and they're very useful. So I don't think anyone's saying we don't want data assessments. I think we're saying that we want effective and meaningful data assessments. I happen to like NECAP and think it's effective and meaningful for curriculum. I don't think it's effective and meaningful for a graduation requirement. I think a lot of what I'm hearing is we want multiple measures. I mean, we don't want just one test. We want multiple measures. I'm in private industry, been in private industry my whole life. I had to pass the certified public accounting exam to become a CPA. But was passing that exam, did that indicate success for every CPA who came in? Absolutely not. I saw Harvard grads that got the highest score on the CPA exam that were fired in their first year because they could not problem solve, they could not relate to individuals, they could not relate to their fellow employees. So I think what a lot of us are saying is there has to be multiple measures, which is Mr. Fizette's point, is what we used to have, and have now gone away from the multiple measures being used to assess whether a student is ready to graduate. And I think that's kind of what, I don't think anyone's saying we don't want data. I think it's the right.
I think we've gone
Yep.
probably a little farther afield than we originally meant to, and I don't want to keep Mary Ann any
Yep.
longer.
Well, thank you so much.
She's put in
You're welcome.
yeoman's work.
Yes.
And I'm sure she's heard our concerns.
I have.
We'll relay them, and Mary Ann, thanks for
I
coming.
would just like Mrs. Herman to read this for me because there's something wrong with my eye, but this is, in all my research, this was my favorite statement that I found, and then I'll tell you who wrote it.
State assessments in math and English often fail to capture the full spectrum of what students know and can do. Students, parents, and educators know there is much more to a sound education than picking the right answer on a multiple-choice question. Some schools have an almost obsessive culture around testing, and that hurts their most vulnerable learners and narrows the curriculum. It's heartbreaking to hear a child identify himself or herself as below basic, or I'm a 1 out of 4. The fact is that no one is more damaged by weak accountability measures than our most vulnerable students. We must reliably measure student learning growth and gains.
Artie Duncan wrote that. So this is where he's coming to. After we had No Child Left Behind in 2001, all the teachers in this room, when they told us every kid was going to be at the same place in 2014, just looked at each other and said, what a joke. Then it comes to 2011 and 12, and all the states start saying, oh, wait a minute. We can't be measured by this because everyone's not going to be able to do the AYP and meet that standard. So they ask for what? Waivers. Over 30 states have waivers. Rhode Island's one of them. So that's what happens when you put something in place. Now, that was 400 pages. I ordered it from the federal government. It was wonderful. The ideas in there were fantastic. They didn't fund it, for one thing, and that was unrealistic. So now they're opting out, and they're looking for full thrust into Common Core, which is globally measured. I think it's very exciting, and if we do that, but we can't do that and do this at the same time. Somebody has to make up their mind. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Black, if I could
Thank
just
you,
say one
Mary Ann.
last thing, in just response to Mr. Bagandi's comments. It's not testing or data collection, I think, that I anyway object to. It's the fact that the entire process and its implementation is hugely problematic and incomplete. And the only one, and ultimately the ones who are being held accountable are the students, not necessarily the school committees, not necessarily the staff, not necessarily even the parents. And what I mean by that is that we don't necessarily bear the consequences of that being held accountable. But I will assure some of the parents that spoke today that I at least will be extremely accountable and complete when we consider these issues going forward, and I think I can speak for at least some of my colleagues on the committee.
And just one last thing, when things were rough at
almost
Tiverton.
there, yeah.
The door's open. But a few years ago, things were really rough in Tiverton with the teachers and everybody. And so this is what happened. Artie Duncan invited Mr. Rarick, the head of the union, and myself. No, that one, there were 3 people invited.
I think it was just you.
If one of them, no, it wasn't. If one of them said no,
Still and Artie.
if one of them said no, we couldn't go. It was to get us all together to sit down and face each other and work it out. And here we are, and we have worked it out, and we should all do that now. We shouldn't be competing, Providence against Portsmouth, against Tiverton. We should all come with our best practices and with the Department of Education and RIDE and say, what can we do to get this done
I will
for the
say that,
kids?
I've been at RIDE for 27 years. I hate to say it out loud. And I have to tell you that I have seen more collaboration across
And
districts
that's what we should be
than I
doing.
have ever seen in Rhode Island. And so I think, yes, this is difficult. These changes are hard. I truly heard you. I get that. But I will tell you that I think things are moving in the right direction. I see, Tiverton, you're working on this. Your teachers are having conversations with colleagues across the state. Best practices are being identified. Data will help us identify those best practices, because I think one of the worst things we can do is make kids go to remedial classes that aren't changing anything.
Right.
And that data will help us say, this is working with this child, this is working with that child, and we've got to get more strategic, and I think we are getting smarter about our practices.
Okay,
So
thank you.
I
Thank
hope
you
you
so
stay
much for
hopeful.
coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Okay, Mr. Rear.
Okay. Our next topic, Ms. Polish asked at our last meeting for a couple of items to be on the agenda. One is an accounting of our expenditures for year-to-date for PD, as well as the next item in the packet is the PD that our teachers have done this year, and a tentative schedule for our first teacher PD workshop, which we held in August.
So this PD expenditures, is this all grant money? Because in our last meeting, we had spent almost none of our budget.
Well, that PD money, that $20,000 line item is really a contractual line item, and we call it PD. It's for administrators and myself, for our contracts.
That's not teacher PD?
No,
that's-
there's a couple of different things.
$20,000 line item is for us.
And that's the one I was.
That was the one you were.
Yeah, but to answer your question, indirectly, we support PD through the biggest number you see on here is our substitute teachers. The substitute teachers are attending PD, and then we're basically paying for their replacements in the classroom. So although it doesn't appear on the PD line item, those
Oh,
expenses.
so it's in salary, it's in
Yeah,
that
and-
substitute line?
Yeah, so I,
Then if you, I'm sorry, Dick, but then if you look on the, in your packet, the next supporting documents, all these, you'll see funding, local for,
Yeah.
many of them
Yeah.
are local.
Yep.
Others are Race to the Top where we get reimbursed from the
Right.
Race to the Top grant that Mary Ann was speaking of
So that
earlier.
$20,000 that we didn't spend,
that's specifically the line item that we have in the administrator's
Yeah.
contract that we put aside of $15,000, and then there's a small component that's discretionary.
so we just didn't spend it?
We typically, Mr. Rurick, everything goes through him, so as the administrators approach him, he gives the final yea or nay whether or not that's going to be acceptable. And toward the end of the year, we do see that spent a little, at a more accelerated rate, but we do put that aside. If it's not used, it becomes part of our balance.
Yeah, it just goes back into the general
Like any
fund
other
balance.
account.
But I mean, given everything we have going on,
That's just how we labeled it
okay.
for the charter.
But it was a good exercise to lay out exactly
Yeah,
where
it was
the
good to
funds
see
are.
that.
And you can see we've spent almost $45,000 to date.
And
That's what I
again,
was-
I believe, Jan and other committee members have asked, how are we gonna use that
Right.
first day?
And which one's that?
That is in the second set of.
blue?
It's blue top.
Yep.
And Diane has done a good job of working with the principals and myself. And you can see everybody, what we're gonna do is alphabetize it, so every teacher can say, hey, where's my name? Because right now they're kind of just put in there, but you can see we're offering 8 sessions, and everything is linked to the Common Core and/or, for example, PE and health, we have to rewrite their curriculum for the state. So they'll be, the PE teachers and health teachers will be in session 6.
And this is one day or 2 day? I can't.
This is just one day.
One day? Okay. Oh, that's right, because you said you wanted to save one for midway through the year.
Right, the first one we're gonna do will be in August before we start, and then the second will probably be in March.
Nice.
And who will be providing or leading the different sessions?
You see on the
Down
bottom, it says
facilitator.
facilitators. Some will be internal, others will be people that we'll be bringing in. for example, Eric Marks and Sharon Scott will be
Social
working on
studies.
social studies. And the student support services, Kate Brennan and Lynn Nicholas.
And you're still working out the location?
Right, because we're trying to put everybody in places
Convenient.
that will be relatively comfortable.
Right.
In some instances, it's not professional development in the sense that someone's going to be doing a workshop or presentation. It's collaborative time for people to get together, especially K-12. It's almost impossible to get people together, so it'll be a good time for them to focus on
All
things
be in one place.
But it is-
specific to their
but it
content
is
area.
PE in the sense, Diane's right, in other words, after PE, we're not bringing somebody in, they're working together to write it.
Right.
Well,
But
Which is
And I would think
critical.
it's very rare that
Right.
they all get to be together.
So this is how we're using those days, again, 6 hours that we wouldn't have had, a total of 12, that we wouldn't have, just, it's the first time we've had it in over 10 years, so.
But, so the two on ELA Common Core standards, are those outside facilitators?
They are.
And
yeah.
do we have any sessions on Math Common Core?
Yes, session 3.
We,
That curriculum?
Session 3 is to support our curriculum work that's been done. So let's see, I forget how long ago it was, we had grade level rollout sessions for teachers to plan for quarter 1. So on this date in August, they'll be planning instruction for quarter 2 from their new curriculum.
So the new curriculum is being written, and has been being finished. They're already writing the lesson plans. This day will ensure that every math teacher, K-4, K-5 through 12, special needs teachers, will all see the curriculum again.
Nice.
For the, maybe some for the very first time, that they've actually looked at it. I would like to think everyone's looked at it by then. But this is where we start looking at the instructional guides to say, okay, this is what you should be doing if you're in grades 3 and 4 in the first quarter, and so on and so forth. So the math teachers will have an opportunity to actually be together and start hammering out the new curriculum. And we'll probably do a similar session in March to catch up to where we, how we doing, like we did with the science.
Yeah.
And we're still learning, we'll be into our second year, third year next year, and we're still adjusting the science curriculum. So that will be ongoing, and then we'll also be doing ELA work starting next year to bring the ELA curriculum K-12 up to within the line of the Common Core.
So the math lesson planning quarter 2, then teachers would meet by grade level, so all the grade level, grade 3
Correct.
math teachers meet together, all the grade, okay, gotcha.
Thank you.
Anybody have any questions on that? No?
And what we're trying to do, and if we do need money for consultants, I'll come back, but right now it looks like it's minimal that we can handle internally, so even though we don't have anything put aside, but I will come back to
Air conditioning?
Air conditioning. How appropriate. Air conditioning, as you can see, we've got requests, or I've received requests from the Fort Barton PTO, and it's been reiterated to me, also CASA, that they would like to install portable air conditioners in the classrooms. And on the surface.
Don't forget Ranger. We're gonna go all elementary schools.
Well, I didn't, as I said, I have requests from, I didn't say anything about giving them.
And certainly that's part of the issue.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Cabral, for duly noted. The request, it's an obvious request. The buildings, as all our buildings, as we feel right now, get very warm, especially those facing the west side. If you're at Fort Barton, all the classes face the west side of the, face west. And on the second floor at Fort Barton and at Cassidy, it gets stuffy. But it gets stuffy and warm here at the middle school and so on. As I said, the question is, there's two questions. One's equity. That is, if we did allow it for the elementary schools, what do you do with the high school and the middle school? You wouldn't have it. And 2, how do you pay for it at the high school and the middle school if you did want to do it? And 3, I don't think the electrical service at the high school, the middle school could handle 60 air conditioners plus, all coming online at once. It's just not built for that.
So
Look
right
it
now,
out.
we have four at Pecasset,
I believe we have, whatever I put in the number.
6
I
at
think it's
Pecasset,
6.
and 4 were because we had
We
students
have-
with respiratory issues that are there.
Prior, in other words, when the children were there, and you had to get.
All
Oh,
Yeah.
so there are no
Just remember-
longer students
Right.
with respiratory issues in
And
those
the PTO, I
rooms?
believe, bought 2 or 3. I might be off on the number by 1 or 2.
Are they
but-
currently being used?
Yes.
And how did they choose the 6 classrooms once the students, well, the original 4 because of student health
I'm going to
needs?
say they stayed there because they stayed
Okay,
there.
and how about the additional 2 that were not put in because of student health issues?
Couldn't answer that.
You don't know how they selected the classrooms, because that's the whole equity issue.
And
Unless,
where are they? In the windows?
They're in the upstairs, yes. Some downstairs.
The upstairs was unbelievably warm, so the PTO purchased air conditioners.
Are they in the
for
windows?
for
Plug
upstairs
in the
classrooms,
windows?
correct. And then downstairs, we have we have 2 students with medical issues that air conditioners were purchased so that they can have seats.
So you do still have 2
We do still have 2 students.
students that need air conditioners.
And we put them in the middle school when they were children.
Right.
And they moved up. And they moved up, and many times they moved with them.
Right.
But this would be a major expansion of what.
Well,
we
I think,
have.
that's what I'm wondering, if it kind of needs to be needs-based, because otherwise,
Yeah.
we're maintaining them, we're paying for the
Well,
electricity.
again, I think even if the elementaries, they probably could handle it because it's newer wiring, obviously.
But we're still how much is the electricity to
haven't
run
even
air
run it.
conditioners
We
all
would
day?
have- I don't even know.
I mean, in my own house, I can tell you
But
it's,
manufacturers usually can give you some sense of that, or they claim to tell you it costs this much money a year to run the dishwasher. I'm not saying that that's what happens, but
It's usually not for a commercial
the,
purpose.
sort of taking a page from both Dr.
Lo-
Burgundy and Ms. Palish, we need a little bit of data.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
What exactly do we need, who's baking, who's freezing, and what would it cost?
You'd be looking, I would assume, if you approved air conditioners at one elementary school.
they'd have to be at all.
Then they would all have to go in,
You'd have to allow them at all.
we'd have to allow them in,
I think it's
if someone wanted to.
fair, because, equity should really be, what does everyone, people getting what they need, not necessarily
I
everybody
would
getting
say,
it.
that if you wanted to do that, you'd have to do the entire upper floor here at the high school, the entire middle school, second floor is a sweat box on certain days. Extreme, it just.
Does the
isn't one-
library have air conditioning
The
there?
library we put in to save the books because
Right,
of a
from
mold
mold.
issue
Yes.
of 7 or 8 years ago. That's why you have these big jet engines behind you.
Right, so perhaps that's to protect the investment.
Well, yeah, I would
We
say,
have the library already protected at the elementary
but
schools.
we don't
But
at
she
Fort
said
Barton.
Fort Barton Library is not air conditioned.
So maybe we need to know what
Maybe we
exactly-
need some data.
Yes, some data.
We need some
Yeah.
data.
And I have I think it would be problematic if we simply accept an air conditioner because either the PTO or a parent bought it, because I can see a parent saying, well, my child's hot, so you can have this
Right.
window air conditioner to use while my child's in your classroom, and next year I'm going to donate it to the next grade up. And that doesn't
Well, and
seem
then
like
it's just we
fair.
incur the liability, we incur the maintenance, we incur the cost of the electricity when you accept it. That's the other piece of it. It's not just we'll buy the air conditioner, we have to, there's all of it. But yeah, I mean, but I could see protecting investment as,
We can look at
Right,
that.
either when there's student health issue involved.
Well, there are health
and-
issues that we take care of those.
Right.
Right,
That's, we don't even think about.
We have a question? Yes?
Comment.
Comment.
I'm the president of Fort Barton
Uh-huh.
PTO, and we
How
have
much money
offered
do you
to
have?
purchase all of them and give them to the school, and we have also offered to maintain them as well. The only thing that would be required of the school department is to pay for the electricity. I
Which,
understand there are issues involved in this. I also know in the fall, there were some days when it was mid-80s in the classrooms on the second floor. Parents experienced that even when we had our open house in the fall, and parents were coming down dripping in sweat saying, oh my goodness, it's so hot up there. How do think that the kids feel in the middle of the day.
Yeah, middle school's the
So
same
there's
way.
probably a
At night.
differential of where the need is, and if,
So
you know,
it's-
knowing
yeah.
what people are committed to
So I've
supporting
actually
us
asked the
with.
teachers on the second floor if they could take data every day as to temperatures in the classroom, and so I can get that.
Oh, good.
I would like to see the facilities committee involved, to see if first don't we have one from our strategic plan? First, to make sure that we're doing everything possible short of air conditioners, there are white shades, but we don't have a committee?
No, I don't think we do. Not yet.
Well,
We're gonna have a
Well,
facility study.
before we stick in air conditioners, I would like
We
to
wanna
make
do
sure
the
that we
facility
have
study.
shades,
Facility study.
that maybe fans would help out.
But-
It's,
So the facility study is a long timeline thing.
Well, no,
No.
we can, I was gonna bring it up hopefully at our
Next meeting?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So
But
whether or not to move forward.
Can we also gather some appropriate people to help us figure out where air conditioners are needed and
Or other,
cost would
cool-
be,
other cooling mechanisms, because there certainly
Right.
is an environmental impact with, I hate to be the green person, with having that many air
I just
conditioners running.
just wanna reiterate the scope of what you're looking
Oh,
at.
yeah, that's what I said. I think it's gonna be cost
It's
prohibitive.
not the upstairs at at Ranger,
Right.
where there's 5 rooms,
Right.
facing the sun.
But let's-
You just look, I can pick them out.
Yeah.
I've been here long enough. I can tell you right now what rooms would need them.
And while the PTO has said they'll maintain
But
them
then the
now, what
question is
happens
the
when that
committee-
PTO goes
What you would
away?
need to decide is what is need.
Right.
right.
Where do you
And
put
based
them
on
in?
what criteria?
And what is your criteria? I mean, it's not something that can be done haphazardly.
No.
You just say, yeah, we'll put them in.
And what's the cost to run them?
What's the cost to run them,
Cost is probably
maintain
the
them?
easiest thing to try to
So
calculate.
I guess that's why I'm suggesting what we need is some data and probably starting a little bit macro, that's not a redundant or a contradiction in terms, and saying, okay, if we had unlimited resources and unlimited electricity and no global warming, we would do this.
Where would
But
it make
we have
sense?
limited resources and global warming and a little bit of help from the PTOs or a lot of bit of help from the PTOs, so we can do Y? I mean, does it
Yes.
make
Mm-hmm.
sense?
And just as an aside, in each individual classroom, like in our classroom, for example, we have 3 fans that run constantly at this time of year and then again in the fall. Even if there was an overhead fan.
That's what I was
or
just
Right.
something, Because now, since Newtown, we're like hypersensitive to keeping classrooms closed off.
Oh.
In those pods, when you have the external door closed and the internal door closed, and a classroom full of students.
Gets hot.
And then the windows at Ranger open in, so there is 0 airflow. It's not only hot, it's unhealthy. Like, you can feel the humidity, the floors get wet. I mean, it's not a healthy.
Because they open in, you can't have them open either because of safety,
Well, you
right?
can open them, but you don't get there. When I say there's no breeze,
Because they're like this
yeah, it just
versus
says-
like that.
And so even then, from the classroom doors, they do remain open, but there's no cross breeze. So like when last year, for example, it was week in May, it was 92 in my classroom at one point. I could at least crack the external door as long as we were in the room with the children, and Mrs. Azevedo across the way could crack her door, and at least you'd get some airflow in there. Now, I'm not cracking my door. The rule is the door stays
Right.
closed. And so you cut that off, and when we walk in, it hits you in the face when you walk in the rooms. I'm just making a point that the 3 fans running, it's expensive. And so even an overhead fan.
Right. I mean,
Yeah,
that would be
maybe-
something.
That's what I was saying, is
Ceiling
maybe
fans.
not going to air conditioners, but maybe some sort of overhead fans or,
I don't know if that's what I'm just saying.
I don't know.
It's not just like, oh, it's a little warm in there.
Wiring for fans.
Sounds like it could be part of a facility stuff.
I understand.
You can do it over the
They're all
summer,
valid
right?
issues,
Right.
but we need a
Bill wants a
comprehensive.
dimmer
Yes.
switch on.
Yes, I
Yes.
agree.
And I think and we can include it in the facility study.
remote
I mean, we can get electricity numbers, Doug can
Yeah.
run them, we can calculate a number. But you have to look at the entire,
Right.
all the schools and say, look, how can we make it bearable? Because we do have new rules in place for security that have impacted airflow, especially in the pods, because it did, as Denise pointed out. That's all very legitimate. On the other hand, you also have the real world and what, you know, what people think, you know, that we represent, and say, I mean, with all the other things we have to worry about, this is something we have to address in a plan, but it's not, I don't think it's something that we need to do, but that we can do, turn on a pin and.
Well,
and
right,
just do
if
it.
it's $100,000 for air conditioning to run air conditioners versus adding 2 new kindergarten teachers.
Well, and which, that's another issue that we'll be bringing up,
I
is
know.
our first grade numbers.
I know.
Are already exceeding our caps, so.
Yes, yes.
I'm sure I could get some other community members and maybe some teachers and parents to even agree to form some sort of committee if we wanted to do like even a capital campaign. Because I know all the elementary schools are now plumbed for central air, is that correct?
Did we do that? No. I didn't think we did that.
No, we took it out of the.
We wanted to.
Fort Barton has the infrastructure?
I
We
thought
don't-
we took it out, but did we not?
We're not prepared for central air. We didn't put in the ductwork.
I didn't think we did.
We had it in there, we had to take it out.
We were gonna air condition the schools, but we didn't.
We wanted the bond to pass.
And is you willing to commit to do something like that, even if it takes a few years to?
Yeah,
get
I
it
mean,
like-
I think the more people who are interested in helping, obviously, the better.
Because now we're gonna need a facilities committee to work
Yeah, you're gonna
off of-
need to figure out.
Once we get the
Right.
report, we're then gonna need to comprise the committee of
Figure out what to do.
anybody, you know, anybody and everybody who wants to help.
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
right.
To move it forward from there.
That's Al.
That's.
No, I think you just want to talk about it.
What about what?
Wiring.
Oh, yeah.
No, I said that, that's usually,
That's a good
I
point.
said that at the beginning.
Right.
These schools, we're lucky the lights stay on.
The high school, middle school, that would be, we're concerned with putting
I'm
computers in the
serious.
rooms.
I know.
That's,
Because of the
just
power
putting
they
the
draw.
computers in is a concern,
And this
so.
is minimal compared to our.
Right.
Yeah.
So we need more information.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what we'll do? Okay.
No, I brought it, you know, I brought
Yeah.
it forward because, you know, it's something, no matter what I said,
Well, and we don't
it
want to,
would've
we don't,
come to you anyway.
we don't want to accept them with knowing that we may not, you know,
Install
I don't
them.
want them to purchase them knowing that we
But
may
right
not.
now, we can't
Right.
sustain them, so
Right.
we have to.
We appreciate your generosity. and
Thank you.
hope that-
Yes.
Hope the offer remains on the table until we,
The offer will remain on the table, I just hope it doesn't take years to come to fruition.
well, we're talking about the facility study in the next
Right.
several months, so.
Yeah, yeah.
So you're going to put that on the next agenda?
It's on the next agenda.
Okay, the 5-year plan, Mr. Fiore?
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Black. Annually, after the budget's passed in each community, the communities are required to send to the state an updated budget, and in conjunction with that, a 5-year plan. So I've been working with our town treasurer, and I've dropped in our 2014 budget, and then based on that, I've outlined the assumptions in my brief memo of what we've done basically the past few years, and I've dropped in these figures to carry our budgets through 2018. You know, the numbers kind of speak for themselves. The assumptions I put on page 1, I put in the cap number for our revenue, and basically the numbers are working at this very high level. So I just wanted to run this by the committee so I could forward it to the treasurer so she could incorporate these figures into her report and then send them on to the state. And I'll be happy to answer any questions. Basically, the assumptions are pretty consistent with what we've used.
What's the second set, that we're 100%? Oh, just that the annual, the ARC is funded at 100%.
Right, and since we don't have our own pension plans, it really doesn't
It
impact the
doesn't
school
affect
department.
us. Yep, it affects them, but not us.
Correct, the police pension on their side.
So, you said I have compiled your projection, assuming 4% increase in local funding.
Which is the cap amount. We've historically built that in as our revenue number and then based our expenses off of our best guess historically.
It's
Just
like
a boil point.
worst-case scenario, right? Kind of.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think we've ever hit
Yeah, I
the
don't
cap the
think we-
last
We don't
6
go
or
over
7
cap,
years, but
no.
For a long time.
to show our...
Yes.
Yeah, we've
yes.
been under the cap.
But we just use that to show that that's the maximum number.
I see what
That we
you're
can
talking
go
about.
to.
I got it.
Yeah.
The worst case that in 2018, it's
All right.
32.9.
I was looking at it in the opposite way.
Yeah.
Thinking, oh, we're gonna get 4% every year.
No.
No, no,
Hell,
no.
you didn't see the fairy dust come down
No.
out of the sky.
That would be wonderful.
I know, I'll offend someone.
Do you want us to have a motion, Mr. Fiore?
If there's no objection, my intent was just to submit this to the town treasurer and
Okay.
incorporate it, so that would be sufficient if there's no objection.
Okay, that's good. Announcements, Mr. Barrett?
Yes, Ian Kutu was the winner of the Rhode Island Foreign Language Association Award for Portuguese. We have a handout there. Mr. Soares did an interview with the local
And this
newspaper.
This is the state, Ms. Bono, this is the whole state Portuguese newspaper for the entire state that Ian was, right? Oh, yeah.
Yes,
Wow,
very good. And
good for him.
and as Dennis so aptly put, it's about time a Portuguese
Yeah.
guy won. Since it's the Portuguese language, you would...
It's nice that it was
Hit a home run on that. Awards night was last week, a very nice function that we hold annually. Wasn't overly warm either.
And we enjoyed the new seats.
The new seats.
New seats were lovely.
So it was a good time. And high school graduation is this Friday at 6. And committee members, I recommend 5:30, so you have a parking spot to
Get your flowers on.
and get your flowers on.
This year.
We give you boutonnieres. No, you don't have to buy them.
That's the only bribe you'll
You have to record it on the ethics.
And quickly, Mrs. Black,
I'd have to put...
I've handed out the financial statements through May. I'm not anticipating any problems. We're through the heating season, and most of our variables have been concluded for the year, so I'm pretty happy, and
Air conditioning season.
right, at least yet.
Still have to go to the 26th, so it's... hold up.
So I'm anticipating us finishing on budget for the year, so I'm pretty pleased.
Well, that's good news, and we thank you very much, and Mr. Barrett, for all of you.
The last item is if we meet on the 25th, or, I'm sorry, the 26th, right,
Yes.
we can't meet, or we can't meet on the 25th.
25th.
Meet on the
25th because of
Not
graduation.
on the 25th, because that's 8th
Promotion.
grade
Right.
promotion.
So we were looking at the 27th.
Right, so if you want to do the 27th, I don't
That's the
believe we need the July meeting.
email I sent out around.
So we can meet in June and
Except I
skip
got
all of
yours.
I
July?
think we can skip all of July.
And you're going to do the facility study?
Going to do the facility study. Carol has a question about the textbook approval
Okay.
process.
Yes.
We also have, I'm
We have any
hoping-
other policy things?
Yeah, so you're going to look at health and wellness, it's supposed to be done
I'm
in
also
June.
hoping to have the student handbooks
Yeah.
approval.
And we were scheduled in June to do a review of superintendent goals, and then in July or August, we'll
Yeah, we can
to
put that on
do
executive session.
discuss new goals for the upcoming year.
We can do that in August.
Could we too, in, I guess if we're not meeting in July, it would have to be the June one. Can we get an update from the various principals or you, whoever
Yeah.
wants to do it, on program and curriculum changes? For
And
instance,
scheduling changes.
Yeah, because I know, like, we're gonna have the senior project, just so we're aware of what they are, because I, like,
Senior project.
I know we're gonna have senior project class, they're all required to have senior project class now.
That would be
My
the
understanding
program of
is
study.
juniors and seniors now are being able to both take AP.
Right.
They have been.
They've always been
Oh,
able to.
okay.
Yeah.
So it's just me that didn't know. If there's are there any changes, like just any
Right.
scheduling,
Schedule.
curriculum?
We're not changing the middle school
Okay.
schedule. We didn't get it done.
So there's nothing else then that's
No,
changing
that would
next
come in
year?
the program of studies.
Oh,
Student
in
handbook.
the handbook.
Student handbook.
I'm with you. So that would
Student
be in the
handbook,
handbook.
We've already approved the high school program of
Right.
studies.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you interchanged the term. Student handbook
I got you.
would have that. So, no, we're not
Okay.
having any programmatic changes.
And Mr. Barrett, can you check the health and wellness policy?
Health and wellness policy, I
Please.
have the draft. I just
Okay.
have to get my
You'll
subcommittee
get
members
the
together.
ladies together?
And we also have the limo
policy.
limo policy too.
Oh, yeah.
I have two requests for future, basically, probably September or when we meet. One is I would like to see the review of the process and instruments of teachers' evaluations, how this is moving along, because I think this is completely new element and we might have to look if,
Well, that's part of
based on
the
what you say,
goals.
if we might
We'll
need some
discuss
additional
that.
resources, potential additional person to actually do it right. The first time we're going to do it, find out how it works and then just.
We can do that. We can do that at our next meeting because we're pretty much wrapped
Yeah.
up with our first year. No, I mean, because we're pretty much done. I mean, the principals are wrapping up their evals now,
Yeah.
and I'm sure that they'll be prepped.
So you can give us an update how it went if you need more people, which I know the answer is yes, but,
Well, we have to see how it works.
Yeah, how did it
basically,
work?
and, you know, what are the
right.
observations
If not, we
for
can
now
do it
and
in the
how we
first
can-
meeting in August. I mean, that digest
And
that.
the
See
second,
how much other stuff you have on.
and the second item I would like to see sometime in September is, like we did before, the review of AP courses, the results,
sure.
the scores, and historically how they look like per subject comparing
Yeah, we'll
to
have
other
them.
districts.
We'll have them in July,
All
yeah.
of that.
No, well, yeah, we can do that this summer. Okay, it's easy.
So is the next meeting going to be the 27th, or can I persuade people that 24th?
27th. I think everybody, the only other one I didn't hear from you on. The
What is it?
27th of June, okay
We can
with
hear
you
you, Elaine.
for a meeting?
I think so, yeah.
Thursday.
All right. I will-
Can you send her a reminder, just that,
I can.
whenever it gets close?
Yeah.
It's Thursday.
No, you just be in charge of the facilities committee.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, that would be good.
That's what happens when you don't show up.
Do I have a motion to, is there, anybody else have any announcements? Any of the principals?
Motion to adjourn?
Al?
Second.
No.
You have anything, Al?